Hey guys, it's Ben Beyond Repair here. I know last time I kind of baited everybody because we wanted to talk about the efficiency curve in spending gold on AD versus spending gold on attack speed to maximize your DPS in a similar way that there is a chart that shows you how you can spend your gold to maximize your effective HP. Now, we ran into some pitfalls, but I'm happy to say we have a nice little chart now. So this is for Kaisa specifically. As I mentioned, different AD carries are going to have different attack speed ratios, and as a result of having a different attack speed ratio, they're going to get different amounts of attack speed when they buy attack speed. So they're all going to have a different chart. This is for Kaisa. I'm going to show you how to somewhat simply find your chart without having to do any math. I'll show you how to find a chart for whatever AD carry. This also applies to just any champion in the game who's wanting to build a mix of AD and attack speed. So if you're playing an auto attack reliant champion in, let's say, top lane or jungle like a Yi or any of these champions, you could use this to think about this as well, keeping in mind some of the pitfalls, right? This is just to maximize your auto attack DPS in a scenario where you're constantly able to auto attack the opponent. In reality, there's going to be several problems with this, right? You have to take a champion's kit into account. So on Kaisa, for example, who we're looking at, this is just based off of her attack speed ratio. She is going to do extra damage on hit with her passive, which effectively is the same as having AD. So when you have attacks that are on hit, you're going to need to add that. So let's say you have an item that gives you 40 on hit. You're going to need to add that 40 on hit to your AD because it's effectively acting as AD every time you're hitting someone, even if it does magic damage, right? The point is how much damage are you doing on an auto attack, right, versus the attack speed that you have and how quickly you're getting those auto attacks out. But they also have, their kit in general. So Kaisa is going to do extra magic damage on hit with her passive in changing amounts, and that's going to be really hard to take into account. But obviously, because she's doing extra damage on hit, which is the equivalent of basically having more AD in her kit, that's going to be better for her if she buys attack speed. So that would shift this curve in reality up, into an area where she should be buying more attack speed. If we think about her AD ratios on her Q and her W, though, she benefits from having more AD, and that's going to shift the curve up. How much exactly that is, that's really hard to say, right? Because it's going to depend on the scenario. It's going to depend on how many abilities you're getting off in a fight, whether they're isolated or not with the Q. It's going to depend on the AD ratio, essentially, that you're getting out of those abilities. So in a fight where you only get one Q and one W off, and you have relatively low total AD ratios, having way more AD is not going to do a whole lot for you there. But having more attack speed might have been better in that situation. So it's really difficult to say definitively, right, based on those abilities, exactly when you should be buying AD or buying attack speed. It's very situational, and it is going to depend on a lot of factors. But certainly her AD ratios in her kit would push you into buying more AD. Her passive would push you into buying more attack speed. The fact that she can give herself some attack speed for a little while with her E would push you into buying more AD or on hit. And obviously, if you value evolving her Q more than evolving other abilities, then of course getting the AD threshold to be able to evolve your Q is very, very important. One thing that I would caution you about, though, is really what this chart is useful for is, are we straying way too far? Because what I was learning when I was looking at effective HP on tank supports is that yes, Locket is a great item with a nice active, yes, Knight's Vow is a great support item with a great passive, but actually on Braum, I get so much more effective HP by building Warmogs that I would rather build it instead of building Locket or Knight's Vow, even though I like the passive or the active on those other items better. Similar thing with the Kaisa Q Evolve, right? Just because you want to get to the Kaisa Q Evolve doesn't necessarily mean that that's always better than building in a way that's going to maximize your DPS. So you really have to look at how much DPS am I giving up, how much in one direction am I over-indexing on AD in order to get the Q evolve on Kaisa. And so you would ask the question, how much extra damage do I do per Q with a Q evolve on Kaisa? How many times am I actually getting a Q off in a fight, or in a game or something like that? And how much DPS am I giving up by over-indexing on AD early in order to do that? That's an important question to know that somebody should probably dive into if they're good at Kaisa. What this chart is going to do is kind of going to help you think about that and think about how much you're over-indexing or under-indexing on a stat. But it's very difficult to say because it's so situational whether her abilities push her in way in one direction towards building more AD compared to this chart, or way in the other direction towards building attack speed. She's definitely got things pulling her in multiple different directions. The other thing is that these charts are going to be more straightforward and have less things pushing it one way or another if you're a straightforward front to back team fighting auto attack champion. So for simple AD carries like Jinx, Ashe, even like Kog'Maw or something like that, that are just auto attacking. For a lot of these champions that are auto attacking front to back, the fact that they're auto attacking constantly and the fact that they don't have anything crazy in their kit that's pushing them way in one direction or another is really, really keeping them more in line with this chart. And so for certain champions, they're going to follow this chart more closely and others are going to deviate away from it. So if Kaisa's evolves are really, really powerful, she may stray far from this chart. But other AD carries are going to follow a very similar path. So let's look at one of those AD carries and show you how you can very easily construct one of these graphs for yourself. And then I'll try to remember and cover all of the different pitfalls. We've mentioned some that really shift how you would look at this graph or what you can get out of it. So really, number one, if we jump back to the spreadsheet here, is we've got a bunch of equations, and you could do calculus in order to figure it out, but it is not easy calculus even for me. So I had a 4.0 in Calc 3, but that was also like 4 years ago or something like that. And this is a multi-equation, multi-variable mess, frankly. And so I have tried throwing this thing. I had ChatGPT do the calculus for me, and it got it wrong. So, I don't know what to tell you about that. But I will show you a, tried and true tested way to get this right, which is honestly, it's a whole lot easier to just graph it. And here's what we're going to do with that. Actually, ChatGPT does some calculus anyways, I think. All we need to do is tell ChatGPT that we have three equations that we're working with, one for DPS, one for AD as a function of gold, and one for attack speed as a function of gold. And we just want to say if we have one attack speed, what amount of AD maximizes my DPS? So you just take this and copy paste it into ChatGPT. Now I just did this. We're going to do Ashe as an example. So we have this, and I just want to briefly explain. So this 2,500 number looks weird, right? Because we're dividing the AD by 35 gold, which makes sense because each AD is 35 gold. The reason why this is 2,500 instead of 25 is because it's giving you a percentage, and we actually care about not the percentage amount of attack speed that we're getting, but we actually care about the number of attacks per second. And so we need to turn the percentage into an actual number. And then this right here is the attack speed ratio for your champion. And so what you're going to want to do if you're trying to do a different champion other than Kaisa is replace this attack speed ratio with the champion that you care about. So let's say you want to, look into Ashe. Ashe has a base attack speed of 0.658. There is a new league wiki that people have told me about, but unfortunately I can't find attack speed ratios on here. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. Either way, Ashe has the same attack speed ratio as their base attack speed. Kaisa is the same way. Some champions do have a different attack speed ratio than their base attack speed, so be careful when you're looking for that you're getting the right number here. For example, Azir has a different base attack speed than his attack speed ratio. So 0.658. So we're going to put Ashe's, was it 658? We're going to put Ashe's attack speed ratio 658. Yeah. Into the thing here, and we're just going to ask it to tell us if we have one attack speed, what amount of AD maximizes my DPS. So this would be one attack per second. And it's going to tell us here that 108.78 AD is going to maximize our DPS for the gold cost. And that's important to know. So all we're trying to do is construct a couple of points. So what I did is I just know that obviously if you have 0 AD or 0 attack speed, you're going to do 0 damage per second. And what we're doing is we're just asking it at 1 attack speed, at 1.5 attack speed, at 2 attack speed, at 2.5 attacks per second, I should say, right? Not the percentage attack speed. How much AD would it be efficient for me to have? So we just ask it this question. We put in the attack speed ratio for the champion we actually care about. We probably only need 2 points, so we're probably fine with this. Maybe we'll get one other one just to make sure. And then we can ask it for what about if we have 1.5 attack speed, and it's going to spit out another number, and it's going to say 162.92. So let's write these down real quick. So at 1.5, this is for Ashe. At 1.5 attack speed, it wants us to have this much AD. And at 1, it wanted to have us to have, what did it want us to have? 108.78. And we can kind of tell off the bat that this makes sense, because when we look at Kaisa's kind of break-even points here, we can see that it wanted Kaisa to have 111 AD if she has 1 attack speed. And since we know that her attack speed ratio was 0.644, and that's lower than Ashe's attack speed ratio at 0.658, we know that Ashe is getting more attack speed when she buys attack speed. So it's more efficient for Ashe to buy attack speed. So she's going to want a lower amount of AD as a result, because she's going to put more gold into attack speed because it's more efficient for her. So we can see, that we've got these points: 0 attack speed, 0 AD, 1.5 attack speed is 162 AD, and 1 attack speed is 108. So these are basically our points. I've kind of, messed them up instead of writing them neatly here, like in terms of X and Y. So I'll just throw them in terms of X and Y. So we have, X is 0, or we can just put 0, 0. Y comes second. We're using attack speed on the y-axis here, so we're going to put 162.92 and 1.5. And then our other point that we're plotting is we have 108.78 and 1. Okay, so now we've got 3 points. We should probably be good with this to make a line. So we don't even have to bother with this ourselves. We can just ask ChatGPT, give me an equation for the line with the points 0, 0, 162.92, and 1.5, and this. Just to make sure, I'll just clean it up a little bit and put it in parentheses, but, it's probably fine, and you're going to see what's going on here. So it's going to spit out an equation of the line. Okay, we can copy this. This is kind of an interesting line, actually. And we can just throw this in here. I'm kind of curious that there's no, whatever that's called. I've been out of school for a long time. I'm getting old. Don't remember how to do any of this stuff anymore. So we're just going to this kind of graphing calculator thing here in Desmos. The lines are probably really close to each other, so that's probably the problem here. Yeah, they're really close. So let me see if I can hide this one real quick. Yeah, so here's Ashe, here's Kaisa. Kind of interesting to compare. But yeah, so what we can do here is we can come to, because it's going to be all screwy the way that it looks. It's going to look like, nearly a flat line because it's trying to show you too much stuff. So what we care about is if we go to this little wrench here, we can set the x-axis to 0, and then we can set the whatever this is. We really only need to see up to like 500 attack damage. You could set this lower, but I find that it gives you a much nicer square image if you set it to like 500 instead of 300. And then obviously our attack speed is going to be between 0 and 2.5 because you have the attack speed cap. And what we can see here, can we pick a different color actually so that we can see the difference here? So green is Ashe and red is Kaisa. And, you know, so you can kind of see the difference here. Let's go ahead and hide the Kaisa one for now. And here we've got the graph for Ashe. So obviously, let's say that we're in this section, right? This means we have a lot of attack speed because we're getting higher on the graph. And, you know, so we're pushing towards 2.5. So if we're in this section, we're moving up towards 2.5 attacks per second. So this means we have a lot of attack speed. So this means that we're over-indexed on attack speed for maximizing our auto attack DPS on Ashe, and that we need to buy AD. So this is the buy AD section. Down here would be the buy attack speed section because we have relatively low numbers of attack speed. So that's pretty much all that there is to it. So hopefully that's straightforward enough that you can construct your own curves for the different champions that you're interested in, because obviously there's a lot of different champions and I'm not able to really present you know, the graph for every single champion. But obviously you should be able to just follow these steps, play around with this, and get your curve. So on a champion like Ashe, since she's probably going to be able to, she has a little bit more range than Kaisa, she probably likes to front to back a little bit more than Kaisa. She's trying to slowly auto people over time in kind of chase down scenarios, not necessarily burst people in the same way that Kaisa is. She doesn't really have any crazy AD ratios. You know, she has her W, she has her ult. Does her ult even have an AD ratio actually? Or is it just AP? No, her ult has no AD ratio. So her only AD ratio is she has 100% AD ratio on her W, which is not terrible, but it's not great. So Ashe is a champion that doesn't have a lot of attack damage ratios in her kit. She doesn't have anything, no attack speed. Oh, her Q actually does give her attack speed, right? So that would push her towards wanting more AD. Her W having AD would push her towards wanting more AD, but not a ton. And she is just going to be able to auto attack kind of front to back. So what we're essentially trying to say now is, okay, great, we have this chart for Kaisa, we have this chart for Ashe. What does it actually help us with? And really what we care about the most is when we're thinking about buying items and what runes we're taking and all of this stuff, are we going just absolutely bonkers in one direction? And I think maybe the best way we can look at this, and let's do Ashe probably as an example instead of Kaisa, because I think obviously people agree that Kaisa's got way too much going on compared to a champion like Ashe. Let's just take a look at you know, like kind of a common Ashe build. Maybe we take a look at an Ashe replay, like a high level Ashe replay, and we just kind of take a look like I did with my health and stuff like that on support. Let's just take a look at how over indexed on attack damage or attack speed an Ashe is at certain spots. So let's go to op.gg and find a really good Ashe player. Okay, hopefully this guy's decent. We also probably want somebody who's following like a standard build, because obviously that's kind of the point, is to see how Ashe's standard build is doing. The reason why I want to look at a replay, so they're going like Kraken Phantom Dancer. This guy went in this game. Kraken Phantom Dancer. So let's just take a look at this game. 34 minutes ago. Let me find this guy. Let's just yoink his replay and we'll take a look at all of his recalls. Whoa, where's the replay? Oh, there it is. Did they change this? I thought that there used to be a button here. Maybe that's only for your own replays you have to enter here. Okay, so let's take a look at this guy's replay, and we'll just kind of, every time he goes back to the shop, we'll look at this real example, and we'll Alt-Tab. It was a little bit loud for my liking. We actually don't really care about the sound or the game. We just care about, you know, where he's at here. I guess we should keep in mind that this was a very good game for him, so maybe he... you know, so maybe that's impactful as well. Where should I even go? Let's go up here. So obviously, let's take a look at starting the game. He has 74 AD, and he has 0.72 attacks per second. So let's think about where we are on our chart. And we can actually maybe even just take the equation and do some math on exactly where he'd like to be with the other variable. So, you know, if we take a look here, and we look at the equation that we got for Ashe, we just got y should be equal to 0.009x, and y being attack speed and x being AD. So obviously, really simply, we can set this up. Just copy. Let's just copy this. And let's just put in whatever attack damage he has. So he has like 74, right? Where are we getting an error? Oh, they don't. You need a time symbol. Okay, so here we go. So at 74 attack damage, ideally he'd want to have 0.68 attack speed. So let's take a look. So he has 74 attack damage, 0.72. So he's just barely over-indexed on attack speed, but that's obviously fine because he can't really control what he's starting with. Barely over-indexed on attack speed. Well, that's kind of interesting, actually, because actually that is something we have a little bit of control over. So what's interesting about this is actually we take attack speed and attack damage in our runes, and so obviously we could get a little bit more AD and a little bit less attack speed. I wonder how drastically that would change this, though. The problem, of course, is another issue, just like when you're talking about buying ruby and it's 400 gold versus cloth armor and it's 300. Another practical issue is that, let's say we were to reverse those runes and decide to take double adaptive force. Part of the problem with taking double adaptive force is that you're getting too much of a swing because we're only 0.04 over-indexed on attack speed. So we're probably going to get so much of a loss of attack speed from changing that rune that now we're going to be over-indexed even worse the other direction. So let's just take a look. Oh, I just played with this guy. Not the Ashe, the Tryndamere. But anyways, let's, I've been doing so much math with daggers, I really noticed his name stood out. I think I might be absolutely cooked, by the way. So let's take a look back here. We can actually do this as an example. We might as well. What would happen if Ashe had taken adaptive force here instead of the attack speed? So Ashe has an attack speed ratio of, what was it, 0.685, is that right? 0.658, my bad. And we know that you get, with the runes, you get 9 adaptive force versus 10 attack speed. Now, the adaptive force for physical damage is only 60%. So if you have 9 AD, you multiply that by 0.6, you're going to get 5.4 AD versus the 10% attack speed. But 10% attack speed doesn't really mean anything to us, right? We need to multiply it against her attack speed ratio of 0.658 and times 10%. So she's going to get 0.0658. That makes sense. I could have just moved the 0. I didn't think about that. So if we were to change this, instead of 74, we'd have 74 minus the 5.4 AD we would lose. But then we would gain, actually, so how much, I guess that's the question, how much attack speed do we want if we lose that 5.4 adaptive force? 0.633. What am I missing here? 0.633. It went down. Why would you want less attack speed? Okay, actually, we don't care about this equation. The reason why is because it's assuming we're buying it, but we're actually getting it for free. So let's leave this alone. But what we actually care about is the DPS. So where's our DPS equation? We don't have one for Ashe, so I kind of have to construct it just for the rune. So, okay, our DPS is going to be... How much AD do we have? We have 74... but we're going to be subtracting the 5.4 AD that we'd lose from getting rid of the adaptive force. And we're going to be multiplying that by the attack speed that we actually have in game, which would be 0.724. 0.724. But we're also going to be modifying that because we'd be gaining in this situation... Plus, actually, we can leave the changes for later because we need to know what our DPS is first. So this is our DPS without the changes. Then if we take away the 5.4 AD and we add the 0.0658 attack speed. Wow. Okay, so we actually do gain... This is one of the applications of this, right? We actually gain DPS by trading our attack speed shard for adaptive force on Ashe. Okay, never mind, I'm trolling. I think I just did if you traded your adaptive force for attack speed. We wanted to go the other way around. Well, obviously you can't take two attack speeds. It needs to be you're losing this attack speed, but you're gaining this AD, right? I might be completely cooked. 74 AD. This is why I never do the math during the middle of the video, by the way. 74 AD. What was the question? So we have Ashe. She's got a certain amount of AD and a certain amount of attack speed. She's over-indexed on attack damage, right? Or is she over-indexed on attack speed? She's over-indexed on attack speed by 0.04. So we want to take away the 10% attack speed. So we should be taking away this amount of attacks per second, and we're adding the adaptive force. Okay. This makes sense because the win rate math obviously suggests that the attack speed plus the adaptive force is better. There could be other reasons for that. For example, Ashe passive slows and things like that. So having the ability to attack quicker and apply the slow even on a champion like Ashe is a thing that exists as well. So, it's complicated for all of these champions like we've talked about. But okay, so fair enough. We fumbled the math a little bit here, but this clearly shows that our DPS is higher with the runes that the guy was currently running with the attack speed and the adaptive force as opposed to not having it. That's a little bit... too much to get hung up on right at the start of the game, but obviously that's one change that we could make. I suppose instead of doing something so drastic and getting rid of, for example, the 10% attack speed, we could get rid of the 3% attack speed that you get if he's running Alacrity, which I assume that he's running. But it would depend on if there was something else that you could run. And we might actually want to take a look then at what runes the guy is running in this game. So he's not actually running Alacrity, he's running Bloodline. So obviously kind of difficult to compare Alacrity and Bloodline in terms of the math that we're doing right now, because they're giving two different things. Bloodline is not giving attack speed or AD, so obviously you're giving up DPS in order to get Bloodline. The idea, of course, is that the lifesteal is going to allow you to survive for longer, thus resulting in more DPS. You know, whether that's true or not, it's probably easier to tell by the win rates of the runes and your feel on the champion and what matchup you're in and stuff like that, for your survivability in lane, your ability to collect gold. That's the other thing, not just your, you know, effective HP or survivability in fights, but also your, wow, this is really hard to see through dark mode. Oh, this site's dark anyways. Okay, so here we go. You can see it does have a slightly higher win rate, but on, you know, 0.1 higher win rate on significantly less games played. So it's really hard to say, you know, which one's better. But not just your ability to survive team fights, but also your ability to sustain throughout the lane, which is going to allow you to get more CS, which is going to make you stronger later on. Maybe that's going to translate into being worth it, maybe not. Either way, his runes obviously seem fine. So that's good. But that would be one practical application, right? Would be just determining whether something like the adaptive force that we're getting from our runes is better than the attack speed. You know, that's one application of looking at this. But we've got our equation set up. So now all we need to do is look at different points throughout the game. You know, so mostly when he recalls and buys items is what we're the most concerned about, because that's going to obviously cause the biggest difference. Of course, he's going to have changes to his attack speed and his AD when he levels up. You know, and so we can kind of see whether he's benefiting, you know, whether he's getting closer to being over-indexed on AD or attack speed. It looks like he's definitely gaining more attack damage than attack speed, because his attack speed didn't tick up at all. Like, I'm sure he gained some here for hitting level 2, but we're still at 0.74. So he didn't even gain more than 0.01 attack speed or attacks per second, but he went from 74 AD to 73. Or from 74 AD to 77, which is +3. So obviously we can see that he's like Kaisa. We did in the analysis with her last time. Probably true of most AD carry champions. They're getting more AD per level in terms of efficiency, in terms of gold. The gold value that they're getting from AD is higher than the gold value that they're getting from attack speed, essentially, is what we're saying here. Meaning that they would be encouraged, you know, as they're leveling up and getting more and more AD, but not as much equivalent attack speed, they would be encouraged to buy more attack speed. So let's take a look. So for example, this is a great first start. So let's look at the item that he goes. So we're talking about buying first item, Kraken Slayer. And so let's look up Kraken Slayer. So here's our build path. So we've got Retrix, which has got a longsword in it. We've got 2 longswords in Hearthbound Axe, but we've got a dagger into recurve bow and a dagger into Hearthbound Axe. And then, of course, we've also got 2 daggers into Berserker Greaves. So we have a lot of different choices between daggers and longswords here, which is, you know, really the crux of one of the things that we can figure out from this is purely in terms of maximizing our auto attack DPS. You know, is it better to go daggers? Is it better to go long swords? And of course, while the AD ratio on her W is going to change things a little bit, right? Ashe is a more traditional champion that's mostly just auto attack reliant with not a lot of AD ratios. And so while she might want a little bit more AD, probably, again, not that much. So we look at, you know, where she's at this point. She's at 101 AD, and she's at 0.77 attack speed. So we can just plug in the 101 AD, and we start to see a bit of a problem here, because in-game, she's currently at 0.77 attack speed, 0.773 to be exact, attacks per second, but she's at this curve suggests that she should be at 0.93 attacks per second. So obviously way over indexed on AD at this point. So the question would be, had he gone longsword and a dagger, or had he gone, let's say, double dagger, or maybe he even has the gold to go triple dagger, would that have been a more effective buy for him at this point? So let's think about that and take a look. So first off, how much gold did he spend on this recall? He had, let's just hop into the game as I'm gathering information here. So we can see that he has 71 gold left over as he's walking off the fountain here. And he bought 2 longswords for 350 each. So he's going to end up with 700 gold and 800 gold if you include, that he nearly has. Well, let's see. I mean, I guess this is 71. So he has, and he also bought boots, right? So I don't really care too much about the boots because obviously I think that boots first buy is totally fine for the movement speed in and of itself. So that's whatever. But essentially here we are spending 700 gold on longswords and sitting on 71. So we probably could have spent, he has time with the wave to wait too. He probably could have spent up to 800 gold on this recall. In terms of daggers, right, for 750, which he has gold for that, right? He could have bought 3 daggers here, for example. So, I mean, again, we can just kind of take a look at the DPS that this guy would have in some of these different situations. So let's take a look at that. Go back here. I think we need to reconstruct. I think I might have just gotten rid of it, actually. The DPS equation here. So the DPS is going to be equal to his AD, which in this case was 101. And that's going to be multiplied by his attack speed, which in this case is 0.773. And that's going to give us his DPS that he's currently at. And then we're going to think about, had he just bought some things differently here? Because obviously this is suggesting that he's over-indexed on AD. He's 0.2 attacks a second behind probably where he should be with attack speed. And obviously he had the choice of buying a dagger and a longsword and getting a better mix between AD and attack speed. He also had the choice of buying 3 whole daggers instead of buying 2 longswords. And so we can take a look at that. So here, if we change the dynamic of this, right, and say that he's going to lose some AD. So there's a lot of different options, right? But let's just start with the triple dagger. So let's say that he loses 20 AD, because he's not going to buy the 2 longswords, but he's going to gain a bunch of attack speed. And what he's going to gain is he's going to gain 3 daggers, which are 10% attack speed each. So that's 30% attack speed. And then we're going to multiply that by Ashe's attack speed ratio of 0.658. And what we're going to get is higher DPS. Not by a lot, but he's getting 0.6 higher DPS per second by going triple dagger. Now maybe there's a better option. Maybe the better option was to go 1 dagger and 1 longsword, for example. So let's take another example here where he loses 10 AD, but instead of getting 30% attack speed, he gets 10%. Wait, can he not buy a longsword? How much is a longsword and 2 daggers? So 2 daggers would be 500. So no, he'd need 850 gold or something like that. And he only had 770. So he's definitely not going to be able to wait that long. But obviously that would be really nice. But he can't really quite get that if he's going to go the boots. How much are Berserker Greaves? Would be another option if you... They're 1100. So when we consider his back, how much gold did he have right before he recalled? That's so much easier, actually, than adding these numbers up over and over. He has about 1,061 gold, and he's like very freshly recalled. So obviously this probably isn't going to show up as crazy of an option either, because he's going to be putting a lot of his gold into movement speed, which isn't going to show up. But you could also, sitting at 39 gold off of Berserker's Greaves, especially if you're planning on going boots anyways, I don't really see why you wouldn't just wait the 39 gold and buy Berserker Greaves right off the bat. What does he end up building here? Yeah, he ends up getting double longsword. So one argument might be, for example, that, well, he's buying double longsword and then going to go a component item that uses it or something like that. His next recall ends up being Berserker Greaves and Dagger. So maybe he should have just bought Berserker Greaves here. So that's another one. That would have been really gold efficient. Obviously one that's going to allow you to spend more gold rather than sitting on that 71 gold, plus waiting for a little bit extra gold here maybe and being able to spend that. A perfect buy with Berserker Greaves is obviously going to be good. So this is, we can label these options before we forget what they are. So this is what he did in game, which was 2 longsword. And then this was 3 dagger, and then this was 1 longsword, 1 dagger, and then we're gonna do Zerks. So if he goes Berserker Greaves, he loses the 20 AD in its entirety, but for Berserker Greaves he gains 25% attack speed. So this is going to actually show the lowest DPS, but he's also gaining a lot of movement speed, right? He's gaining 45 movement speed as opposed to buying tier 1 boots, which gave him what? 25 movement speed. So he's taking a hit of, let's see, he's almost at 76 DPS. He's taking a hit compared to what he could maximize here. He's taking a hit of like 2.5 damage per second to gain, I'm not showing the math. He's taking a hit here by going Berserker Greaves because he's at 75.9 damage a second. So compared to the one that would give him the maximum damage, which is actually triple dagger, he is taking a hit of like 2.5 damage per second if he's just sitting there auto attacking someone, but he gets the added benefit. Would you trade 2.5 damage per second here on this recall to gain an extra 20 movement speed? That's a call that a lot of AD carries would make, but it's close, right? The question would be, I don't know, so let's say if you dodge one ability with that extra 20 movement speed and you save yourself 100 HP, and because of that 100 HP, you get a whole extra auto attack off, right? You get a whole extra auto attack off because of your movement, being able to chase somebody down, being able to dodge an ability and have more HP longer to fight, also adding to your survivability. You can easily see how 20 movement speed is going to give you 1 additional auto attack in a fight. And so if it's giving you 1 additional auto attack in a fight, 20 movement speed might result in an extra 75 damage being dealt from you. The extra 75 damage being dealt from you is really, really big, because if we think about how many seconds we would have to be in combat for 2.5 damage a second to get all the way to 75, right? 2.5 damage per second, 75 divided by 2.5 damage a second. You'd have to be in combat for 30 seconds straight autoing someone before you'd get an extra auto attack in. So if you feel like tier 2 boots is going to allow you to get 1 extra auto attack in on that life, you're going to do way more damage with the 20 movement speed. So obviously I'd like Berserker Greaves here because of that. And because of how efficient it is with spending all of your gold. But these are some options. So we had 1 longsword, 1 dagger. Unfortunately, probably the best comparison, we don't actually have the gold for it, But if we had a little bit more gold, right, we're really close, something like 100 gold off of being able to do 1 longsword and 2 daggers. So we could look at that as well. 1 sword and 2 daggers would actually give us by far the most DPS, which makes sense because it's a little bit more expensive, but like it's a big bump up in DPS, right? We're talking about 4 damage a second on compared to 78 with what he bought. If he had backed with an extra 80 gold or something like that to be able to buy 1 longsword, 2 daggers. So that's really interesting, right? Okay, so we're moving on. So he went double longsword. He could have had more damage per second by going 3 daggers. And that would have also, if he's intending to buy Berserker Greaves later, also if something bad happens in lane and he dies or is forced to recall with a very small amount of gold, he's actually going to be able to complete the component that he's looking to build. So some people might argue, right, let's say that, yes, I'd like to maximize my DPS, but I also have to worry about building a component that's better. Like, let's say you're playing Jax or something and you want, I don't know, it's not the best example because if you're going Triforce, you probably want Sheen first. But let's say that you want Phage over Hearthbound Axe or something like that. You might feel inclined to start building the longsword because it's going to go into your Phage, as opposed to the dagger, even if the dagger is slightly better, that's going to go into Hearthbound Axe, right? So that would be an example of like, yes, the attack speed's better in terms of maximizing my DPS, but I might want to make sure I'm completing that component because the movement speed that I'm going to get from completing that component the next time I back is more important to complete this component in the right order than to complete or than to pick the wrong an item that builds into the wrong thing. An example of that could also be for AD carries. Like, let's say you really want to prioritize Retrix because of the movement speed, and Scout Slingshot is a terrible component. It sucks. You may not want to build, if you're building a Static Shiv or something like that that's got a Scout Slingshot in it, you may not want to prioritize those daggers as hard if it's going to prevent you from being able to complete Retrix on your next back, because now you need the whole 900 gold or whatever for Retrix, rather than having that. So there's all this little stuff in here too. But yeah, obviously 1 longsword, 2 dagger, really, really nice. Berserker Greaves, pretty nice. And big differences in DPS across the board here. So, these are some things that we could take away from that. But since we know this guy was intending to build Berserker Greaves first, if 3 daggers was going to increase his DPS at that time and build into the component he wanted to build first, or the item he wanted to build first anyways, why not go 3 daggers here? So objectively speaking, right, you have a really high level good AD carry player, and we're already seeing that they're making slightly wrong decisions with their components. Not huge amounts here, but I guarantee you that when you start going through some of these items, these are the small things. We're talking about now a longsword versus a dagger, like starting components or in the middle of building your item. What can be even more profound is, okay, I get an extra 200 or 300 damage a fight from building this item because of its passive, and I only get 250 by building this item. Like, like Kraken Slayer on Ashe versus Blade of the Ruined King or something. Maybe Blade of the Ruined King does less damage. But what if Blade of the Ruined King's stats are actually so much more efficient on your DPS curve that all of a sudden the attack speed that some random item you wouldn't think to build, like the attack speed that you get on Blade of the Ruined King, or the attack speed that you get on Runanan's Hurricane or something like that, actually ends up being so much more valuable that even if you feel like you're getting 50 less damage, 100 less damage or something like that from, and maybe the numbers will be higher on AD carry champions. I'm thinking of like numbers that you would normally see in like tank situations and stuff like that, right? Low damage numbers. But so maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe, instead of thinking about like numbers that you would see from in a team fight from like Locket or Knight's Vow, which are like 200, 300, maybe on an AD carry, your mythic item is giving you that active or passive is giving you an extra 400 damage in a fight. Well, now you have an item that's 300, but it maximizes your attack speed versus your AD in such a way that you're going to make up for the 100 damage and then some by building what you think is a worse item, because people are only comparing the actives and the passives and not comparing the gold efficiency of the stats, and not just the gold efficiency in terms of like the gold efficiency of the item in terms of like, is it giving you a good amount of stuff for the cost, but gold efficiency in terms of maximizing your DPS. Am I spending my gold in a way that's maximizing my DPS? So we'll get into that when we get into some of the bigger items here. Be more interesting, maybe some more findings. So obviously he should have opted for triple dagger, especially if he was going to go boots second anyways. He could have also waited and got Berserker Greaves if he valued the movement speed from buying boots right away versus you know, a little bit of extra DPS. And then of course, if he had managed to back with a little bit different timing, so much better to buy 1 longsword and 2 daggers versus 2 longswords. And that's something that's super important to keep in mind as an AD carry, because we're talking about quite a significant difference now there in DPS between, you know, doing this and doing this. Okay, so let's hop back in and see what happens on his next back. Oops, I keep putting that up every single time. Okay, so he's back into lane. Blah, blah, blah. We don't really care. When's the guy back next? We only care about his recalls. We don't actually care about the game. One of the reasons why it's good to do this kind of in-game comparison is you have to keep in mind that this isn't going to be static. So you're not always, you know, like these were close to the numbers. So let's say he, you know, gets a lot of assists this game, which he does. It's a very good game. You know, let's say that he stacks Alacrity really fast this game. Maybe a different game, he's not going to stack Alacrity so fast. And so we're not going to, you know, care as much. Okay, so at this point, he's taking a 1100 gold recall. He's actually got like 1160. Obviously, he could wait for probably like 1200, especially with the wave crashed into their turret again. So, you know, the guy's looking at potentially a 1200 gold recall. And he had tier 1 boots and 2 longswords. So, oh, we kind of missed it, just barely. Because he bought the Berserker Greaves right away. Oh, we should already know, actually. I didn't need to go back. We already know his AD value and attack speed value with the boots and the 2 longswords. So, if we go back to, well, let's see what he buys. So he buys Berserker Greaves and a dagger. Okay, so let's look at where he went and, you know, where he was. So obviously we can forget about these things. But this is where he was with 2 longswords, right? He was at 101 AD at that level, right? So he's also going to have gained some per level and stuff like that. And he was at this much attack speed. Actually, I don't know that this is relevant. Okay, so where is he at this point? Yeah, we don't care where he's at before. Okay, so right now at level 6, collecting information again. With this buy, he left 127 gold on the table. And he's sitting at, where's his stats? 106 AD. And he's sitting at 1.041 attack speed. 1.041. And so that's his DPS currently. So his DPS is 110. Let me switch back to the sheet. So his attack damage times his attack speed that he has at this point is giving him 110 damage per second. So that's, you know, with this buy that he went for. So again, oh, I forget how much gold he had. How much gold did he have when he went for this buy? Like 1160. Let me write that down here. Like 1160 gold. Maybe he could have waited for up to 1200 or something like that. So what are our options here, given that we already had longsword and tier 1 boots? So we have a couple of different options, right? We can go Berserker Greaves. We can go I guess we've kind of got a limited number of inventory slots. We've only got 2 inventory slots left, so we can't go, quadra dagger here or something like that with what we've got. But we can definitely go Berserker's Greaves. Looking at Kraken Slayer, we could go Hearthbound Axe. We could go Retrix. We can basically go whatever. We could go Recurve Bow. He did build Kraken Slayer first, right? I do believe. Yeah. So he went Retrix, Recurve Bow, Hearthbound Axe. He did complete Greaves here. And a dagger. So plugging these numbers into here, again, to tell us about how much attack speed we should have, we can see that at 106 AD, he should have 0.97, and he's now over-indexed on attack speed by buying Berserker Greaves and the dagger. And so that's interesting, because then that would suggest, okay, he's over-indexed on attack speed, and more so when, again, we consider the fact that Ashe does have an AD ratio on her W, so we'd probably want to be even favoring, like before when we were just slightly more AD than attack speed, probably a good thing, because even if our DPS was a little bit lower than it could have been, when you include, okay, I'm getting 1 or 2 W's in, then all of a sudden our DPS may be higher or about the same with the longswords, for example, that we saw in the beginning. But here, we have a situation where now he's gone the other way and he's got too much attack speed, but not by a ton, so it's not too bad. He's still pretty on curve. So, we can think of different options here. So obviously the one I'm probably most interested in is Recurve Bow, because then that's going to give him a really nice mix of on-hit damage and attack speed. But to be honest, I think that it's hard to compare these components, because now we're getting like into territory of, we're just trying to figure out how do we value the movement speed, right, versus the attack speed and the attack damage. And that's not really the point, right? That's something that is complicated and really hard to say, because you're comparing apples and oranges. There's not really a great way to know for sure that getting the movement speed is going to result in this or that happening. So it's very, very tough to compare the movement speed as a stat to, any other stat, to AD and attack speed or any of that. So obviously if you go Recurve Bow here and like a longsword or another dagger or something like that, I'm sure that you're going to get a lot more DPS with a buy like that. But the question would be, is that worth it compared to the movement speed? So obviously he went Berserker Greaves. So he went Zerks and dagger with this one. I like Berserker Greaves, so I don't really have much of a problem with this. Probably the most obvious one would be, what if we went like Zerks and Longsword instead? And what if we went a completely different direction just to see, is the 20 movement speed, because Zerks is giving us 20 movement speed here, so outpaced by the DPS that we would have gotten if we went like a recurve Longsword or something like that. So what could we have bought here? So this was about a 1,200 gold back. Upgrading the Berserker's Greaves would have been an 800 gold buy, and the dagger was 250. So 800 plus 250 would have been 1050 that he actually ended up spending here on this. If he went Zerks and Longsword, obviously he would have been able to utilize more of his gold, which is obviously important as well. So not only is he going to go attack damage instead of attack speed when he's over-indexed on attack speed, but he's also going to get to spend more gold here. So that probably would have been better. Especially because he ends up completing Retrix and Recurve at the same time. Maybe, again, you could make the argument that he prefers Retrix, and so that's why he wanted the Longsword, so that he has a better chance of getting the Retrix on his next back, because he bought that first, even though he bought them both at the same time. He bought the Retrix first, although that could just be a left to right order thing at that point. He bought the the Retrix first, so it's really hard to say what his intention was there. But a lot of AD carries, I would say, prefer the Retrix because of the movement speed. But okay, so he, Zerk's Longsword, what does this do? So Longsword is 100 more gold, so this would be 1150, not 1159. We're not like Walmart or something trying to stick a 9 there on the end. And then the other question would be, okay, so if he went like a recurve bow, that's only 700, isn't it? And then how much gold does he have left over? I mean, he could spend up to 1200 here probably. So, and we should probably try to stay a little bit under 1200 would be more realistic. We don't necessarily want to wait the 400 gold or the 40 gold for a longsword or something, but we'll see. So, he could spend up to 500 gold here. Do we have anything that could give us 500 gold? Yeah, since we wouldn't be completing Zerks, we could go double dagger. So we could go recurve plus 2 dagger. This is a little bit cheaty because then we're spending just more gold, right, than the other ones. But let's try recurve, and instead of going 2 daggers, let's say we're only going to spend like the 1100 or the 1150. Say we're not going to wait for any gold, and so we're going to stick to that. If we can only spend 1150 and we've already spent 750 on the recurve, we could go like recurve plus longsword. Should make sense as well because that would maximize our DPS instead of giving us any useless stats. And so let's see, recurve is 700 and then longsword is 350. Okay, so 1050. So this is the same exact price as what he went to, by the way. Okay, so how much DPS are we getting with these different things? So here's where he's at. And now instead of buying Zerks and Dagger, he's going to lose some damage or some attack speed, but gain the attack damage. So here we're going to have how much he's losing 1 dagger. So he's losing 10% times his attack speed ratio on Ashe, which is 0.685. Oops, I messed up my parentheses or something. 10% times the attack speed ratio and we've got to have a plus here. Okay, so we can see here that if he went Zerks and Longsword, it actually makes a big difference, right? He's getting to spend an extra 100 gold, and he's buying attack damage instead of attack speed here when he should be buying attack damage because he's over-indexed on attack speed. It makes a big difference, right? We're talking about a 7 damage per second difference while he's auto-attacking. And keep in mind that you want to be on pretty much any AD carry. If you have any AD ratio, you want to be a little bit more on the AD side of things rather than the attack speed side of things. So you want to be a little bit over-indexed on AD. So this is good because not only are you doing 7 more damage per second, but your W is now also doing an extra, if it's 100% AD ratio, Ashe's W is now doing an extra 100 damage. Let's see here, W is 100% AD ratio. So yeah, now her DPS is 7 higher per auto attack, and his W is doing an extra 10 damage. Whereas with this one, your W is doing 10 less damage, and you're doing 7 less damage in auto attack. And these are the same because you get Zerks in both of these. So you're gaining the 20 movement speed in both of these as well. So it's clearly just better to go Berserker Greaves and Longsword here, but the guy is going Berserker Greaves and Dagger. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? This is the application of this, is you can take this chart for your champion and take a look at when you're buying certain components, because I know down to the component when I should be buying this ruby crystal, that ruby crystal. Now, luckily for me, let's be honest, right? My build is a little bit easy. It's ruby crystal, ruby crystal, ruby crystal, ruby crystal. So maybe that's a little bit helpful to me, right? But you can do the same thing on AD carry. You can say to yourself, okay, on my champion, right? When I go back and I have 250 gold. What am I going to buy? I'm going to buy a dagger because I can't afford to buy anything else. If I have 350 gold, plug it into the equation here. Is it better for me to buy the longsword or the dagger? Now, maybe the answer is that, if you buy the dagger, you're getting to spend more gold. You also have, maybe you were over-indexed on attack speed anyways. Maybe a different champion's over-indexed on AD, and so maybe the dagger's not as nice. But also keep in mind, of course, the caveat with this chart, which is your ability damage is going to come in too. So even if you're doing an extra 30 damage with your 3 abilities with 100% AD ratio, you're getting 10 damage on each of those 3 abilities from having a longsword. So you're dealing an extra 30 damage. That's important to keep in mind as well, because dealing that extra 30 damage could be, if we're talking about like a 7 auto attack difference here, in this case, it's towards the AD side. So that's very beneficial either way, right? In both categories. But let's say that this was, by building more attack speed, we got 7 extra damage per second. Well, if we get, 30 damage from abilities, we're starting to approach the point where we need to be in combat for a certain amount of time, like 5 seconds, before the attack speed is better than the AD. And so maybe in some fights that's worth it, and in other fights that's actually not going to be the case. Or you're going to burst somebody, you're going to trade with them. Maybe you're not just using those abilities that way that one time. Maybe you're using them multiple times, and then maybe the AD is better. But the point is, right, you're going to look and you're going to say, okay, is dagger better or is longsword better? And do I, is the, component that I'm completing out of that component better? So do I want the rhetorics first? And so I don't want to be building the daggers, even if the daggers are a little bit better. Something like this. Do I want to complete Zerker's Greaves because I really care about the movement speed? Something like this, right? But at least think about when we're building what component, because really good players are giving up, 10 attack damage, 10 damage on their W, and 7 damage on their auto attack for the on a recall where they could have just done this different thing and they're just not doing it, right? So keep that in mind. Okay, so then we've got like the next option, which is probably going to be even better because we're not prioritizing movement speed with this one. So this is going to have a much higher DPS. Recurve plus 2 daggers. I mean, this one's going to be cooked. This one's going to be a lot of DPS. So recurve plus 2 daggers. We're not losing any... Hold on. Did we take away... Uh-oh, maybe I did something wrong. Oh, that might be why this is so much higher. We got to be really careful with this. So with this one, we actually did this wrong, I do believe, because we need to be adding 10 here. Oh, it's even... Oh, no. Okay, it's just a little bit closer, but it's still... Okay, so I actually did it wrong. So it wasn't so crazy, but it's still true that you should be buying Berserker Greaves and Longsword. So I messed up a little bit here, which is actually when we're changing this, I was just realizing this with the 2 daggers, because there's already 1 dagger in here that we, don't need to be adding both daggers. We're just adding 1. But so yeah, I made a mistake here, which is I needed to be subtracting the... Oops. Now where are we going? I needed to be subtracting the dagger, not adding the dagger. So I added a dagger and forgot to add the longsword. So I basically just gave him an extra dagger. But this is the result of getting longsword and Zerks. It's still almost 3 damage per second higher. Plus, again, you're going to do an extra 10 damage on every W. So still, same concept here, which makes sense because we're spending a little bit more gold by doing this. But, same concept. I just screwed up the math a little bit. Moving on to the next example and making sure that we're adding these correctly. So we had Zerks and a dagger before, so we need to take away 10 AD on this example. And we're adding 2 daggers plus recurve bow. So how much attack speed are we getting from recurve bow and 2 daggers? And actually we're only adding 1 dagger because we had a dagger in the first buy that he went. So we're getting 15% attack speed plus 10% attack speed. So we're adding 25 versus his original buy of 1 dagger. We're adding 25% attack speed. So that's being added. And then we're losing 10 AD. But what's really interesting here, it's already higher. We're also gaining on-hit damage, which is, like I said, the equivalent of AD on the recurve bow. So the passive is you do 15 bonus physical damage on hit. So that's actually crazy because that's going to add an extra 15 damage here. And look at the difference in the numbers here, right? So now we're really starting to get into, okay, how valuable do you really think this 20 movement speed is? Because we're getting I mean, it is a little bit, we're spending an extra 150 gold, but I mean, really with his wave state the way that it was, completely shoved into the enemy turret, he's 39 gold off, right? The guy can wait 39 gold. So what you end up having here is a situation where you're going to get an extra 24, damage per second here. That's really, really big. Now you are going to lose all of the damage you would have gotten on your W, but actually you don't get any bonus damage on your W here anyway. So you're not losing any damage on W compared to what he actually went in the game. You're just losing 20 movement speed from completing Berserker Greaves. So is 20 movement speed worth the 24 extra damage per auto attack? Probably not, because then you start to get into, like we said, okay, so what if we get in 1 extra auto attack in this one? So let's say we get 110 extra damage because we got in 1 auto attack. How many extra auto attacks will we have to do with this one? Well, we're getting an extra 24 damage. So roughly speaking here, we need an extra 4 to 5 auto attacks, to make up for, and not like gaining an extra 4 or 5. Like if we auto someone 4 or 5 times in a fight, that would make up for the damage we would get from, let's say we have a fight and we auto somebody like 5 times. We would do so much more damage with this that even if we got to auto them 1 extra time with Berserker Greaves because of the movement speed, we'd still do more damage with this. So now you have to really say, and obviously you can get into a fight where instead of autoing 5 times, especially early in lane, you might be autoing the guy like 10 times. You might get into a skirmish, you're autoing 10 times. It's totally possible. So now we're talking about like big amounts, So if you auto 10 times, I mean, it's definitely close, right? It's hard to compare how much you're getting for movement speed. We don't know whether we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we need to get that 1 extra auto in because of our movement speed or not. We don't know how many times we're going to have to auto attack the person. Certainly if you're playing versus a tankier champion that you're going to be autoing more, right? That would be more valuable. But let's say, you also have the movement speed allowing you to dodge. So maybe you dodge 100 damage and you deal an extra auto attack. And so you get 200 damage worth of value in the fight out of the Berserker Greaves. And now you have to, you would only get more value out of the recurve bow and the 2 daggers in a fight where you autoed somebody 10 times or more. So it's close, it's hard to say, but obviously this is a big jump in DPS, so it's really worth considering. When we're talking about an extra 24 damage in auto attack, we really need to be thinking about what components we're building. That's all I'm saying. So then we've got this one, which is recurve and a longsword, which probably, well, we'll see. We'll see the DPS on this, but recurve and longsword's interesting because it's also cheap, right? You don't have to wait any gold for it. It's spending the exact same amount of gold that he bought, but it should be less damage than obviously the most expensive buy we could have taken here. But so let's say that in this situation where we're going to get recurve and longsword, let's get rid of all this extra stuff. So recurve is going to give us plus 15. And we are going to get longsword, so we're also going to get plus 10 here compared to his original buy, which gave no AD or no on hit. But we're going to lose quite a bit of attack speed, I think, because we're going to lose the attack speed that we would get on Berserker Greaves. I'm looking at another thing here. Do we only get 10% from upgrading Berserker Greaves? I think we do because he already had a dagger or something. But anyways, that's on that one. Okay, so we're getting 15 on hit, 10 for the longsword, and then what attack speed are we gaining / losing? So he didn't have any of the attack speed, so he gained 25%. So we're losing now that 25%. So minus the 25%, and it's going to be more than that because we're also losing the dagger. You know, so that's going to be another 10% that we're losing. However, we're gaining attack speed back in the recurve bow, and that gives us 15% attack speed. So that's going to take this down to 20 attack speed that we're losing. So you can see here that recurve and longsword is going to give us 118, which is better than what he went by 8 damage per second, although you're going to lose the movement speed, and for only 8 damage a second, you probably don't want to lose the movement speed of Berserker Greaves. It's going to beat out Berserker Greaves and longsword, but again, you're missing the, and this would have been more optimal, right? Because this is just better than this because you're not losing anything by going this at all. You're gaining damage on your W, you're getting the same amount of movement speed. So you would just never go what he actually went here. You'd always go this. So you're only getting 6 more damage per second and you're losing the movement speed. So really the option would be between really all-inning on damage but not getting any movement speed, or, you know, getting the movement speed but losing all this damage. And these two are kind of, you know, up to your personal preference and how you think the fights are going to play out, and very hard to figure out mathematically which option is better, but you know, there you are. You know, so those are some options that he could have gone there. So I don't think recurve longsword is very good. Very interesting, you know, large differences here. For example, like recurve and 2 daggers is big difference between recurve and a longsword. Okay, so that makes sense. So let's move on. Again, the bigger impacts are going to be, when does this guy take a recall and like complete Kraken Slayer? You know, how is Kraken Slayer curving for Ashe? You know, and is the passive so much better than other items that he could go that we really, really want, you know, that item instead of something else? So we're taking a look here, and he's fighting here. So let's see if he recalls after this. Maybe he shows his wave in to get a plate. We take dragon and recall, and we can do some more math. Nice. Okay, we got to pause it real quick. So he's taking about, he has 993 gold, so it's about 1,000 gold recall this time. Okay, so we're taking 1,000 gold recall this time. And let's see what he buys for his 1,000 gold. Well, we know he upgrades his longsword to Retrix and his dagger that he had here into recurve. And that's it. So since he had a dagger, man, they changed all these costs. I keep having to look it up. You know, recurve would cost him 700 minus 250. So it'd be costing him 450, I believe. Yeah. So 450. And then he's also going to get Retrix, which is only giving him 5 AD and then the 4% movement speed. And Retrix costs, if he already had the longsword, oh, those numbers aren't nice. 425? Yeah. So 875 then, out of the 1,000 gold that he had to spend. Again, he's not really spending all of his gold. I mean, we're really close to being able to just buy something else as well. So let's think about this. And then obviously, like, he's getting the movement speed, 4%. Not a ton of movement speed, though. I mean, we can look, right? We look once he moves off of the fountain, you know, what amount of AD does he have? So he has 114 AD. And at 114 AD, he should have 1.05 attack speed. He has 1.093 attack speed. So he's a little bit over-indexed on attack speed right now. So maybe he would have been better off. Oh, except he's not, because it gets really confusing. But he actually has 114 AD, but now we have to add the damage from his passive on, which he just got on recurve bow, is giving him 15 damage on hit. So actually he should have 1.19. So actually he's under-indexed on attack speed at this point, given the on-hit damage he has. Okay, fine. So spent 1,000 gold. Obviously he went for 875 on what? Like recurve and retrix. Okay, so what does he get here? So his DPS really gets confusing again because we have to add the on hit, is 114, plus he's getting 15 from his passive on his recurve bow. And his attack speed is 1.093. So he's got 140 DPS, almost 141 with these recurve and retrix here. So the question would be, what could he go instead here? So obviously we'd like something that could spend closer to 1,000 gold on. We know that he's over-indexed on attack damage and on-hit at this point, you know, because of the on-hit damage he has on recurve bow and stuff like that. Oh, except... Okay, so that's fine. So let's think of some alternatives here. So what was he sitting on before? He was sitting on... honestly, looking at his build path here is probably going to be the most helpful. So he was sitting on Berserker Screeves and Dagger, and then he had 2 longswords from before. So he had Berserker Greaves, longswords, 2 daggers. So, I mean, obviously he could have gone something like Hearthbound Axe. He can go recurve bow, he can go retrix. Obviously, retrix is going to give you the movement speed, but it's obviously going to give you less damage. So if we look at like Hearthbound Axe is giving the most, but it's the most expensive. We could go some components, which I kind of like because we can make use of those inventory slots. Usually components are very efficient. Like just the daggers or the long swords are usually very efficient. But I don't know. I mean, Hearthbound Axe and recurve bow could be very efficient for DPS because of that. So then the question would be, how much movement speed are we getting from retrix? I think that there's a lot of one-track mind thinking when it comes to the movement speed. So maybe 20 movement speed makes a big difference from Berserker Greaves. But if we jump in and think about how much movement speed he's actually gaining here from retrix, you know, before he bought it, when he's sitting here on Berserker Greaves, he has 388. Oh, maybe we're looking at his movement speed off the fountain or something, or because of karma. Let's make sure he's not getting movement speed from karma when we're looking at this. So he went from, well, he's 385. What was he before? $370. Oh, maybe Karma shielded him right before he recalled. Hold on, let's make sure we get this right real quick. Yeah, he got shielded right here. Okay, so 370, and then he recalls. How much movement speed are we actually getting from Retrix? He goes to 388, and then 400 while he's in Fountain. And then he gets more from the Karma Shield. So did he really go from 370 to 403? That's kind of a lot. Let's check on that. So what would 4% of 370 be? Uh, 14.8. So where did this movement speed come from? He had Berserker Greaves already. Oh, something dropped off of him. Now he's at... Oh, were we clicking on Karma or something? No. And now he's at 385. So that makes sense, because 370 plus the 4%, which is right about 15. So anyways, he's getting about 15 movement speed. Okay, so 15 MS. Well, that's actually quite big, right? That's almost the equivalent to the amount of movement speed that he got from moving from tier 1 boots to tier 2 boots. It's a little bit less. I mean, it's 25% less movement speed than that, but it is... you know, it is 15 versus 20 from upgrading Berserker Greaves from tier 1. So that is a significant amount of movement speed. Obviously, if we were trying to maximize our DPS here, given the items that we have, and we know that we're under-indexed on attack speed, so we want to be looking at attack speed options here. I like Recurve Bow. What about Hearthbound Axe? How, like, you know, Hearthbound Axe is probably the one that people are overlooking the most, because it's like, I think most AD carries would prefer Retrix, then Recurve, then Hearthbound Axe. So let's think about Hearthbound Axe here. So, I mean, like, I like, instead of going Retrix, because that's what he already went. Sorry, I didn't spell it right. Let's, that's probably not how you spell it either. The C is back here. What a weird name. What if he goes like Recurve? So that's going to be 700, but he already has a dagger, so it's only going to be, what, like 450 or something like that, right? And so he's got 600 gold left that he could spend, basically. Almost 600. So what could you get for 600? 2 longswords is too expensive. You could get a dagger and a longsword if you have the inventory space. Does he have the inventory space to do that for 600? Also, we're pushing it there on the cost again. I mean, it's a 50 gold weight. He probably could. He has Waven again. But maybe you can't. I mean, these wait times are a lot harsher for AD carries than they are for support. So I do apologize if I make some assumptions on how long you can wait. I usually think waiting for 50 gold is fine. But maybe that's wrong in and of itself. But, you know, let's try to keep the cost a little bit cheaper, because obviously that'd be really OP if you could curve right into waiting an extra 50 gold and getting like Recurve plus dagger plus longsword would be an option. If you have the inventory space. So what does his inventory space look like? So he's got boots and he's got dagger. I mean, honestly, even if the guy does have potions, he should probably just sell them or something at that point. Did he have potions? No. So he had one open inventory slot because he had 2 longswords, unfortunately. So the problem with going something like what? Recurve is going to build out of the dagger that he has, so that's not going to take a spot. But another dagger and a longsword, he literally can't go this anyways because of the inventory space. I mean, so you could go recurve plus longsword, but then if you're going recurve plus longsword, you're basically just going to go recurve plus retrix. I'm sure that you can't afford recurve and hearthbound axe, so we really need to just be looking at like the hearthbound axe option. So obviously hearthbound axe, because he's got double longsword already and a dagger, would only be 250 gold. Oh, maybe he can go both. So he can go hearthbound for 250 gold, and that actually cleans up all of his inventory space. So he could even go something wild like hearthbound and like daggers and longswords, but he could also go like hearthbound plus recurve bow, which would be 700 because we use the dagger towards hearthbound, but that would be 950, so that's really close to the amount of gold that he has. So hearthbound axe plus recurve, and what does that give you? So this is a really interesting one. So obviously compared to what he built, he's going to have the same thing in terms of the recurve bow. So taking away the retrix only takes away what? 15 attack damage. So we're taking away the 15 attack damage for now. But then we are adding it back. Uh-oh, I broke something. We're adding it back because when we look at hearthbound axe, we're getting 20 AD. Oh, this is why this is such a bad item. Never mind. We actually already have the 20 AD from the 2 longswords that we're sitting on here. We do move from 10% attack speed to 20%. Oh, so wait, so upgrading hearthbound axe doesn't do anything. It's just giving us a dagger. So we gain 10% times Ashe's attack speed ratio, which is 0.658. And we got to parenthesis this off. So that's not good. But yeah, that's not good. That's just not good. Hearthbound axe sucks. So you're spending more gold, you're getting less DPS. Yeah, that's just terrible. That is absolutely terrible. Because then what we're comparing here, right, with the hearthbound axe and the recurve in practice is we're spending an extra 75 gold, which is fine if we're going to spend it all anyways here. But we're spending an extra 75 gold. Recurve versus recurve is the same, but then with hearthbound, we're only completing it to basically get an extra dagger. So we're just getting 10% attack speed from hearthbound. No, nothing other than that. With the retrix buy, we're getting like an extra 5 AD plus 15 MS. Actually, they both kind of suck. Either way, you're getting more DPS from going the retrix. Wow, I'm surprised how bad that is, but that's pretty bad. Is that really the case? You don't get any AD. Well, we added the 15 in here. Do we need to add the recurve? 114 plus 15. Maybe we do need to add the recurve in here. Maybe that's why. Oh, we do. Wait. Okay, I better double check this one. So why do we have the 15 added here? The reason why we have the 15 added here instead of the normal way we would put it is because we're just noting essentially that, you know, your effective damage per second here with the recurve bow is 15, that it's just separate from your attack damage. But really, like when we've done these before in the previous examples, we would just put this number together. It's just one number times one number in the thing that he actually bought. In this one, we have to add in the 15 extra damage. So I think when you're looking at this, the difference is, I was kind of confused how this could possibly be behind the Retrix, because the Retrix is only giving you 5 AD, whereas this is giving you 10% attack speed. And we're also under-indexed on attack speed. So we'd obviously get more damage from doing the Hearthbound Axe recurve, but it's probably not worth doing because we're only getting 9 extra DPS, and we're losing out on 5 extra damage on our W. We're losing out on the 15 movement speed. We're having to spend more gold to get it anyways, which in this recall in particular doesn't matter. But if you were normally comparing, right, like the gold amount for what you're getting here, it's not a great buy. But certainly you could get more DPS by doing this. But I think that the movement speed is more valuable in this case. So that's, looking at Hearthbound Axe. Like we said, I think any way you do the other things, I mean, I guess your best option in terms of maximizing your DPS would be to do recurve bow. And then instead of doing Retrix, so how much inventory space do you have? Well, maybe this is why we ended up at recurve Retrix, like I said. You'd really just don't have inventory space at this particular point in his build. Otherwise, you have more options. If you go like recurve bow plus 2 daggers or something like that, or recurve bow plus dagger plus longsword, like we talked about, you really just don't have the inventory space. So the problem is that if you go recurve bow, you're just going to end up buying Retrix anyways, as opposed to buying, an additional longsword. I mean, I guess you could go recurve. So this is a problem. We actually said this as an option before. You go recurve longsword, but that's the same thing. Oh, it's not the same thing as going Retrix, actually. Not that it's a better buy, but actually you're only getting 5 AD. So with this one, you would get 20 AD, but then lose the movement speed. So you are going to see 15 extra DPS by getting that. But it's, it's not going to be, but you're actually going to, no. Okay, you don't, Retrix doesn't give any attack speed, so you don't lose any attack speed. So yeah, you do actually get a significant bump up here with some of these. So I don't know. Then you get into like 15, how many times does 15 go into 100, for example? Like 6 or 7 times. I mean, that could be worth it instead of the movement speed, right? It does depend on the situation for that one as well. Then I guess you could say, like, you could definitely see some situations where you're autoing somebody 7 times and then, doing an extra 100 damage because of the recurve bow and longsword as opposed to recurve and Retrix. So this looks confusing, right? This even confused me because, like, you're thinking, well, if you're buying Retrix, but you're not actually buying Retrix all the way. You're upgrading a longsword to a Retrix here. So this is like recurve plus 5 AD. This is recurve plus 10 AD. So that's where the difference is coming in. That was confusing me as well. But the point is that, like, obviously 15 extra damage per second, versus 15 movement speed. If you're in a fight where, again, you're saying, okay, I get 1 extra auto attack off because of my movement speed, but if I'm autoing somebody 6.66 times or whatever, that's the math. Ooh, that's spooky Halloween numbers. But, that's the math. If you're autoing somebody like 6 to 7 times, now all of a sudden, if you're autoing somebody 7 times, you're doing more damage with the recurve and the longsword as opposed to recurve Retrix. But then, like we talked about, maybe you dodge an ability. This is the other thing that's complicated, though. Really hard to say about movement speed. You don't know when you dodge an ability. It's really hard to say. Did I dodge that ability because of the 15 movement speed extra that I had from Retrix? Right? Like, did I only dodge that ability because on Ashe I was at 385 movement speed as opposed to 370. Because you may well have dodged that ability just from having Berserker's Greaves, and having the Retrix is not necessarily actually, so just because you, even if you do dodge something, it doesn't mean it was only due to the Retrix, right? How much are you attributing to the Berserker Greaves and how much are you attributing to the Retrix? This is one of the problems with movement speed. So I think people dodge an ability and then they value that as like, you know, very highly for a pretty cheap thing. But then it's like, actually you spent all this gold on movement speed. So was that really worth it? Very complicated, right? Okay, so there we go with that. Let's keep it moving. Otherwise we'll be here all day. Again, really it's probably more interesting to compare because the component comparisons are interesting, but you kind of have to plug and play with your own champion and stuff like that. Really the interesting thing is, do the big item curves line up with you know, where we might expect them? And our build's kind of pinched, you can see at this point. Like at the beginning of the game, we didn't have many things we could go, but at this point in the game, like we're already, you know, we've already got certain components and stuff like that, so we only have like one place we can go basically with our build. Okay, so here, oops, we had 834 gold. Well, let's call that like 850 or so. Okay. And let's see what we've got here on the recall. So we recall and we get Hearthbound Axe, and that's it. Was that really it? Didn't we have like 800 gold or something? It says that we spent all of our gold. I'm really confused. Hold on. Oh, because we lost some of our components when we upgraded the Retrix and the recurve bow. Okay, hold on. So we only had one longsword. So we gained a longsword. So we bought a Hearthbound Axe from, let's see, we want Hearthbound Axe from one longsword. So how much is Hearthbound Axe from one longsword? It is 1,200 minus 350. So minus 300 would get you to 900, so 850. Oh, great. Okay, so that's exactly how much gold we had. So we buy Hearthbound Axe for 850, and we think about how this is going to impact our DPS. So we already had one of the longswords, right? So when we look at Hearthbound Axe giving 20 AD and 20% attack speed. But we already had one longsword, so we're actually only gaining 10 AD, but we are gaining the full attack speed. And we actually, you know, we don't need to do that. We can just look at how much attack speed the guy has after he leaves the fountain here. He has 1.245. 1.245. And also we can go over here and we can say that the guy has 126 AD. Plus he's got his 15 damage on hit. So the guy's got, you know, he's looking at, according to his DPS curve equation, he should be at 1.3 attacks per second. He's a little bit under indexed on that here again. So again, attack speed might be a little bit better. We're kind of limited in our options here, right? If we want to complete Kraken Slayer, but this is where we start to get into some interesting concepts, right? If we want to complete Kraken Slayer, then we need to look at that. Actually, we won't be doing it on this comparison. There's really just nothing you can do. If you're going Kraken Slayer here, this is really your only option. I mean, there may be some weird scenarios like I talked about where you could buy an extra dagger or something like that into your next item and kind of delay your Hearthbound Axe. And hopefully if you get enough gold to complete Kraken Slayer on your next back, you still complete Kraken Slayer anyways, and you add a little bit more DPS in the meantime. But that's also a gamble because you don't know how much gold you're going to come back with on your back. Generally, we're going to play towards buying the item that we actually want to buy. So there's not a whole lot to entertain on this recall, really. You're kind of pigeonholed into one decision. Really, the interesting point will be, okay, Ashe has Kraken Slayer. This is how much his DPS is. This is what the item gives in terms of stats. What if he had gone some completely different item? I don't know. So let's take a look at that. That'll be interesting. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have yapped for an hour about random components that were giving 2 extra damage per second instead of jumping right into the meat of the Kraken Slayer versus another item on AD carry, for example. Okay, so let's there's actually really nothing to look at here in terms of this item decision. So let's jump into his next recall when he gets Kraken Slayer. Oh, he died. Okay, he dies and he completes Kraken Slayer here. So really, we don't even care about this decision to purchase Kraken Slayer. What we care about is, okay, we've got an Ashe with Berserker Greaves and Kraken Slayer. What are his stats, right? And his attack damage is 139. And so we're going to note that down. His attack damage is 139. And his attack speed is 1.398. And we're also going to have to take a look here at what's going on with this 15 on-hit damage now that he's got Kraken Slayer. So he no longer has this passive from, the Sting passive actually goes away. So he no longer has this 15 bonus physical damage on hit. He instead has the passive. Basic attacks on hit grant a stack for 3 seconds, up to 2 stacks. At 2 stacks, the next basic attack consumes all stacks to deal 150 melee to 200 based on level, or 120 to 160 based on level bonus physical damage on hit. So at this point in the game, we have a level 9 Ashe, and so he is going to be doing 124 damage on hit, but only on that 3rd attack. So how do we want to value that? It's very weird, right? You kind of have to look at many different scenarios. Is he getting 3 auto attacks off? Is he getting 6? But we're just going to take a look at kind of averages because we're probably going to be in an average scenario. So the expected value that we're getting is the average of this. So let's say that we're getting 124, but because we're only getting that once every 3 auto attacks, 124 divided by 3 is 41.33 damage on hit. So we can add this in here. 41.33333. Put a bunch of 3s in there. And this is suggesting that Ashe should have 1.66 attack speed at this point. And he's at like maybe 1.4. So he is under indexed probably more than before on hit and physical damage. Okay, so now let's think about the rest of this. Increased by 0 to 50% based on targets missing health. So again, in an average scenario, and this gets really tough too, because maybe on average you're not actually hitting someone at 50 HP, because that would suggest that they're equally willing to fight you and trade with you and let you hit them when they're at 10% HP as when they're at 90% HP. And we know that that's not likely to be true. So the reality here is that, and this, it used to work like this with cut down in some of these runes too. You wonder like, well, how is this one outperforming the other, even though technically they're providing the same thing? One of the reasons why cut down works better than the other ones, and they had to nerf it a little bit too, is because people are much more likely to actually fight you when they have more HP. So you're getting to do more damage with that rune. That being said, you could argue that like getting to do more damage at a more impactful time could matter more, but also you could overkill someone and then not get any damage from something like coup de grace. So it's a tough one with estimating how much damage we're getting on this one, because I want to say 50%, but I really think that people are less likely to let you hit them if they're lower like that. So I think it leans more towards like, the 60% range, or I guess in this case, 40% of their missing health. So I'd say that it probably leans more towards 20% extra damage than 25%. So it's going to increase the damage. It's going to increase the damage here. It's weird because there's like a cap too. It's going to increase the damage here. If we were doing 41.33, that's going to get increased. So that times 1.2 if on average you're hitting them when they're 60% HP. Or when they have 40% of their missing HP. So that's going to bump that up to like 49.6. And then the question would be, what about the cap? Are we hitting the cap? That's more on-hit damage, by the way. So we're even more indexed into on-hit and physical damage as well because of Kraken Slayer. So the question would be then, are we hitting the cap? Because there's also a cap here of 186. And we're getting a much lower number at like 49 because we're dividing it by 3. But actually we're doing 3 times as much as that. So even in this average scenario, we're doing 149, right? And that is only like 30 off of hitting the cap. And so obviously if we're hitting someone and they're actually at like 90% missing HP or 80 missing HP, we're going to run into this cap. So how much damage would we need to do, or how much missing HP would they need to have at this point in order for us to actually just straight up hit the cap? So the cap for us at level 9 is 186. We're doing 148.8 if they're missing 40% of their HP or have 60% of their HP. So we'd need an extra 30. We'd need to be doing an extra 37 damage, which is what percentage of 148? It's an extra 25%. Well, we're already assuming that we're doing 20%. So we'd only be hitting the cap at 45% or above. So only at 90% to 100% missing HP would we be hitting the cap at this point. That's pretty negligible, especially because we're already just assuming that we're moving from 50% to 40% of their missing HP because they're more likely to trade with us at higher HP. So I'm pretty comfortable leaving this at, I think this would adjust it down. Maybe we're getting 19% or 18% reality out of this. But I'm fairly comfortable leaving this right here where it is at 20, even with the cap. Okay, so that being said, this is really important to note, right? So what are we actually gaining from Kraken Slayer? What we're gaining in terms of an active and passive is an average of 49.6 damage on hit. Obviously, it's every third attack. It's a little bit gimmicky. There's caps, there's missing HP, all this stuff, right? But the point is that on average, at level 9, we're gaining about 49.6 damage on hit, and all we're gaining from the item is damage on hit. So the question is, especially considering that we're over-indexing on AD in order to get this item. Is there an item perhaps that gives us some other active or passive that is straight up better or is slightly weaker but gives us more attack speed and less damage on hit and AD, and so therefore is actually the weakness in its active or passive is made up for in the advantage that it gives us in other areas, like in our DPS maximization, for example. So let's, think about Kraken Slayer here for a second on Ashe. So that's where we're at. We really need to pick another item to compare to it, because we know that we're over-indexed on physical damage. We know how much on hit we have and stuff like that. So what's another option that we could go instead of Kraken Slayer? So let's look at some other options that people are going. People are looking at Blade of the Ruined King, Static Shiv, Wit's End. So I mean, let's just kind of look at the numbers, and we've got to consider cost too, but let's think about this, right? So think about Wit's End actually versus Kraken Slayer. So Wit's End, first off, is 300 gold cheaper. And in terms of attack speed, we're getting 50%, whereas we're only getting 40% on Kraken Slayer. So this is an item that's going to help give us more attack speed in a situation where we want it. Now, Kraken Slayer is giving us 45 AD, and it's also giving us that 49.6 on hit. So you can kind of think of Kraken Slayer on average as giving us 45 plus 49. I mean, it's nearly 100, but it's something like 95 AD is essentially, or damage per auto attack. Wit's End is giving us 45 bonus magic damage on hit. So that is a lot less damage on hit. To be fair, we're gaining 45 magic resist and 20% tenacity, and we're also losing 4% movement speed. So that's the comparison. I have to say, on the face of it, I think we're losing way too much physical damage. I don't think we're over-indexed that much, so I think that seems kind of bad. So we could compare it, but I think on the face of it, that's not that great. An item like Infinity Edge is giving us no attack speed whatsoever. So that's obviously really rough. Ashe has special interactions with her passive in Infinity Edge, affecting the slow instead of like critting. So that's interesting. Blade of the Ruined King is giving us 40 attack damage and attack supply 6% for ranged enemy current health physical damage on hit. So if the enemy has like 2,000 HP, what is 6% of that? Would be like 120. So this is an item that if they had 2,000 HP, this would be giving you like 120 damage on hit plus 40 attack damage. So that would be like 160 attack damage, but way, way, way less attack speed. Actually, not that much less, 15% less attack speed. And then obviously this gives you lifesteal, and then attacking a champion 3 times slows them by 30% for 1 second. So you have those things as well going for the item. And then in terms of cost, Blade of the Ruined King is 100 gold more expensive than the item. So, I mean, let's just take a look at some of these. And then Static Shiv is obviously going to be the closest. So I guess we'll kind of take a look at Static Shiv's passive is going to be really hard to compare though. But I guess we'll take a look at these top couple of items that people are building first on Ashe and think about how it's impacting her DPS. So obviously we can start with Kraken Slayer, and so the DPS that he's getting is however much attack damage he has, which in this case was 139. Plus, we're getting 49.6. So it's all this. It's this piece of things. On average from the hits. And then for attack speed, we have 1.398. So we're looking at, on average, about 263 DPS with Kraken Slayer. Okay, and this is, in terms of cost, Kraken Slayer was 3,100. So now let's look at, we had like Static, Bork, or Blade of the Rune King, and we also had, what was the other one? Wit's End. And of course, there are other items that, I'm not an Ashe expert, so there are probably other items here that that are really interesting to think about as well. Let's see, what is an item, just going through some of them and taking kind of a first glance, are there any other items that are worth considering? So like, I don't really think Infinity Edge is very good because you're not getting any attack speed, but it depends on how Ashe interacts with crit. It's just a whole nother problem, right? Trinity Force is giving 36 attack damage and 30% attack speed. And it's got the Sheen passive. But that's not that great. Imagine Ashe like using E to get Sheen passive. That'd be funny. But it's not terrible. Obviously, it's giving a lot of other stats like health and ability haste, which are fine, but different, right? Like, kind of hard to compare. Not necessarily something that we're looking for on Ashe, but maybe it's fine. Essence Reaver is giving 60 attack damage, no attack speed, so that can't be that great. Phantom Dancer is giving a bunch of attack speed, but no physical damage. Also interesting to note, right, that it looks like people are going, I think we said, Phantom Dancer second. So I think this guy goes Phantom Dancer second, and the most common build for Ashe was to go Phantom Dancer second here. So that's really interesting, right? Because then when we get Kraken Slayer, even if we're over-indexed on AD or something like that, then when we get Phantom Dancer coming in second, then in combination as a 2-item combo, Kraken Slayer, Phantom Dancer might be just pretty good, right? Okay, so then we've got like Static Shiv, Bork, Wit's End. Are there anything else? We were looking at items to see if there's anything else that's worth even comparing. Terminus giving 30 damage on hit plus 30 attack damage, so 60 damage, 35% attack speed. That's not terrible. It's 100 gold cheaper than Kraken Slayer, and it's giving 60 damage instead of like 95. And it's giving 35% attack speed instead of 40%. But obviously you have the added benefit, but it's a whole nother problem, right? But like, obviously you could imagine a world where the penetration plus the armor and magic resist that you're gaining might be worth the DPS that you're losing. But, kind of weird, very defensive first item. Runanans. Well, I see the biggest problem with Runanans is that, or I always keep calling it Runanans. It's Runans. Runan's Hurricane, you guys got me on the last one. I did this. 40% attack speed, but no physical damage, no damage on hit. It applies on hit effects. So obviously you'd want to have some on hit effects first. Otherwise, like, what is the point, And you're not getting very much AD, or you're not getting any. And same amount of attack speed as Kraken. It is a little bit cheaper as well, significantly cheaper actually. Okay, Bloodthirster giving a lot of AD, not any attack speed. Okay, all these are pretty bad. So I can see that. Like, in fact, a lot of reasons probably why AD carries are going Kraken Slayer and Static Shiv, which I'll say too, like, this is what we're talking about here in terms of this problem where 80 carry champions are building Kraken Slayer and Static Shiv or Bork or something first item like every single game, because instead of a crit item, because none of these items are crit items, even though they're going Infinity Edge or something after. And Riot is sitting there wondering, like, why are 80 carries going that? Well, this is exactly the problem we're talking about. Because these items give a good mix of physical damage or on-hit damage and attack speed, they're not over-indexing you like crazy into attack damage like you would if you went Infinity Edge first, or if you went a Bloodthirster or something like that. And they're not over-indexing you on attack speed like if you went I don't know, like a Runenans or something first. But so that's kind of the issue, is that like, even though you might want to build a crit item, or I guess Phantom Dancer would be the good one to compare as like a crit item that over indexes you on attack speed. You can't do it because like you have to build an item that's somewhat efficient. And so the reason why you see a lot of Kraken Slayer, Static Shiv, Bork is because these items give a good mix of AD and attack speed like we're talking about. Otherwise, you might want to build Infinity Edge first, or Phantom Dancer, or Phantom Dancer was giving some AD. You know, otherwise you might actually opt for a crit item first when you're going a crit build, which would make sense. But, you know, although that would be very strong, right, if you were able to do that right away. So, okay, anyways, these are probably the only ones worth really thinking about. So if we look at an item like Static Shiv, what is Static Shiv going to change? So let's, you know, pull up some of these items here. Okay, so Static Shiv, they both give the same movement speed, so we can keep that out of the way. It's going to be hard to compare, though, because Static Shiv is obviously giving you that wave clear benefit. So first off, let's just write down the cost. You know, the cost is 2,900, so it's a little bit cheaper, so that's nice. Especially actually if we're already over-indexed on AD and attack speed anyways, this is going to allow you to move on, or let's say AD anyways, then this is going to allow you to move on to Phantom Dancer earlier. So that can be decent. 50 attack damage, 35% attack speed. I really have a tough time comparing the active or the passive because it's just doing like apples to oranges things compared to Kraken Slayer. Like Kraken Slayer is very clearly designed to give you DPS. It's going to show up really big in our analysis here, you know, whereas this is not. So we're obviously going to lose all of our on-hit damage by going static, first off. And then, you know, the other thing we look at with static is, so we're losing all of that on-hit damage, and we've got 50 attack damage instead of 45. So we are going to gain 5 attack damage back or whatever, compared to our original amount. So we're going to gain 5 attack damage back. And then in terms of the attack speed part of the item, we're getting 35% attack speed instead of 40. So we're also losing 5% attack speed. So this would be minus 5%. Oops. And we're going to have to multiply this by Ashe's attack speed ratio of 0.658. Okay, so 196. Let's see. So 196. So that is terrible. And all that we gain in return is the passive. Killing minion or monster fires the chain lightning that deals 120 magic damage, hitting up to 6 targets on a 3-second cooldown. Man, this is really bad. I mean, okay, so let's start to think about, because you have to try to convert this into some damage to champions, otherwise this item just looks terrible, right? I mean, obviously, so we're giving up a huge amount of damage per second. We're giving up, you know, 67 damage per second, roughly, you know, on average, between Static and Kraken Slayer. But this is assuming that we're not getting a passive from Static at all, so that's a little bit unfair. My point is, you're giving up 67. We're going to do some shenanigans with the math to try to give you some damage onto champions with the Static Shiv passive from killing champions and then that chaining in a fight, or from killing minions and that hitting somebody in lane sometimes. But, and there's a big but, It's a lot of damage to give up for, you know, so you're giving up a lot of damage for a wave clear. And you have to hope that that wave clear is worth giving up that much damage for. I don't know why that would be, but maybe. Okay, so let's try to give you some damage with the chain lightning. 120, so let's say that you hit somebody once a wave, right? A wave comes every 30 seconds. The problem is it's really hard to compare, you know, well, how many auto attacks are we getting in then with Kraken in 30 seconds? Because that's what we're comparing. Super hard to even compare. Because I can't just, you know, say 120 damage in total. So it really depends, right? Like if you're autoing somebody once per wave and you're dealing, you know, an extra 67 damage with that one auto attack, right? So let's say with Kraken and Static, the way the lane's going, you get one auto attack off on somebody per wave. You poke them with one auto attack. This does an extra 67 damage. But if you're building Static and you hit them once per wave with 120 magic damage, then you're going to benefit more from Static than you would from Kraken in terms of damage dealt to champions, plus you're getting the wave clear. So that would be very nice. Reality is that you're probably not averaging hitting somebody once per wave with Static. Most of the time you're not hitting any champion. It's just about the wave clear. Even if you do, we compared it to one extra auto attack, or one, not even one extra auto attack, just one auto attack with Kraken versus one auto attack with Static. If you're actually fighting somebody, right, which is the most important time for your itemization to be coming in, if you're actually fighting somebody and you're autoing them like 10 times, you need to make up for like 670 damage with Static. And that's just not happening, right? 10 auto attacks, you're never getting close. Even if you killed 3 people in Chain Lightning, and like, I guess maybe if you kill somebody and you hit Chain Lightning on like 3 people, maybe. You know, maybe you get there if you get the, is it assist too? Yeah, takedown. So you do get it off of assist. So maybe you get a team fight where they're all clumped up. And, you know, if you had a 10 auto team fight and you hit 3 people, the 600 and plus 70 times, so it would be 810 or something like that. Maybe the 810 magic damage from Static Shiv would be greater than the 670 from the 10 auto attacks you got with Kraken. So that could certainly be, you know. That's not terrible. I mean, that's not impossible to happen in fights for sure. But if you're in a single target fight, then it's really rough, right? Like if you're just targeting one person down, you're losing a lot of DPS. Plus, Ashe is a pick champion with her ult that looks to do that. You know, so that's not ideal. But you do also get the wave clear, and you do also get some poke with the item in lane. It's kind of comparing apples and oranges, so it's a little bit difficult, a little bit hard to compare, right? But you get the idea. Okay, Blade of the Ruin King. So let's take a look at Blade of the Ruin King, right? How much DPS is this giving us? So now when we compare Blade of the Ruin King to Kraken, we're, you know, immediately going to lose this on-hit damage and just have the same amount of that. So we're taking away the on-hit damage. Where even are we? $40 attack damage versus 45. So we're also going to have to take away 5 attack damage from the, you know, attack damage that we had there as well. And 25% attack speed as opposed to 40% attack speed. So we're losing, what, 15% attack speed? And then we're going to multiply the 15 times Ashe's base attack speed ratio, or not base attack speed ratio, but same thing on Ashe. So we lose that. So we're losing some attack speed, and we're losing some attack damage. The cost is 3,200, so it's 100 gold more expensive. We're getting to the good part, hopefully, for the item. We do gain 10% lifesteal, but we're losing the movement speed. Attacks apply an additional 6% enemy current health physical damage on hit. So I think we did this, but if they have 2,000 HP, 6% is 120, and it's every hit. So 120 every hit. Wow. That's really good. Now, to be fair, right, we did make an assumption here, which is we did assume 2,000 HP, to be fair. And maybe they're going to have less. But I'm kind of curious then, what would the break-even point be between, let's say, the DPS that we're doing with Kraken Slayer versus the DPS we're doing with Borg? What do they need to have? So let's say they have even only 1,000 HP. Times 6 would be 60. So what if we replace this 120 with 60? So Kraken Slayer is just barely beating out Bork if they only have 1,000 HP. How much HP do people have in this game with the Ashe that we're looking at right now? So this is right after Ashe completed Kraken Slayer. So everyone's around level, I guess 80 carry bot lane, Omega Lol, we're at level 9. But, 1,500, 1,500. This guy's at 2,000, but he's kind of a tank. This guy's at 2,100, and he's playing Silas. Is that right? Oh my god. Busted champions. Volibear's at 2,000, but he's a tank. These guys are at 1,500. So it really looks like, for the most part, the squishy carries are around 1,500, around level 9. And the tanky champions that are building HP are around 2,000. So it's going to depend on the game, obviously, for Bork. But a more realistic comparison is not going to be to compare Bork at only 1,000 HP when you're buying the item. In fact, because it's a little bit more expensive, you're actually going to be completing it just a tad later. And so, if they have 1,500 HP, which is assuming they're all squishy, by the way, not even against tanks, we're going to have 90 damage here, and we're going to be out damaging Kraken Slayer by 28 damage per attack. Now, what are some of the other things to consider here? Because this is one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, and you're going to find this across the board in many different situations with many different champions. But, what's really interesting about this is, like, okay, so what would be the downside to going Bork then? Well, you do lose the movement speed. There's only upside because these champions aren't going to be squishier than this. So when we think about the externals here, or the other things, yes, it's 100 gold more expensive. Yes, you lose. So here's all the negatives. You lose the movement speed from Kraken Slayer. You lose 5 attack damage, and so your W is going to do 5 less damage per W. You, I think we already said it's 100 gold more expensive. You lose the 5 damage. You lose the movement speed. That's it. Positives are that you're doing 28 more damage per second with Bork, even against squishy champions at level 9 that are 1,500 HP. And there's only upside to that if they're tankier. So if you go later in the game, the item scales better because people have more HP, I believe, right? Oh, never mind. I'm trolling. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, my bad. The reason why Bork's not that good, and I was wondering, like, how could it be so much better than Kraken and the win rate's low, is that it's their current health, which is fine. You would be doing this much damage if they were full HP. But again, let's say that you're actually doing this damage to them when they're on an average of like 60% of their HP. You're not going to do 100% of this damage. Instead, you're going to do like 60% of this damage or 40% of this damage or something like that. Or I guess it is beneficial that they're mostly going to be fighting you when they have more HP. So you're going to be doing 60% of this damage. So when we said that if they're 1500 HP, you're going to do 90 damage on hit, you can take that and cut it by 60, or multiply it by 0.6. I guess we're cutting it by 40% if you want to think about it that way. So instead of 90, it's actually 54. Okay, so we're doing, against squishy champions, right? We're doing 20 less damage per second. I guess 19 at level 9. It would scale as you go later into the game, though. So for sure, if they have more current HP, if we're getting into level 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, later into the game you go, the more Bork is going to do. So eventually, if you do get to that break-even point where, let's say, they have 1700 HP or 1800 HP, then you're getting better. And of course, if you're doing the same concept, but instead of, because they're scaling later on into the game, if you're fighting tanks, obviously, and this would make sense, where is Bork as a situational item actually good? Where does it surpass Kraken Slayer? If the average HP of the enemy team is, I don't know, like 1600, maybe 1700. So at 1700, you would get 102. But because we're going to assume that you're dealing damage to somebody who is 60% of their HP, on average, who's fighting you. Same thing we assume for Kraken, by the way, so keeping it fair. We're still going to be under-indexed at 1700 HP compared to Kraken Slayer. And then we have all those negatives. So the positives for Bork, right, we didn't really finish because we realized this. The positives for Bork would be the slow, the lifesteal, and potentially the damage. But only if we find a little bit more damage. So where do we have to get to? 1800? $64. I think we're still not there yet. 1900? Surely this will be it. 114. Oh, but we got to multiply that by 0.6. 68.4. So we're going up about 4 for every 100 HP. Yeah, so this is pretty even. So they need to have more than 1900 HP. So just a little bit more. They probably need to have like 1920 HP or so is about the break-even point for Bork versus Kraken. And then Bork is also more expensive. Like we talked about, you lose the movement speed, you lose the 5 extra AD, and on Ashe, not so big of a deal because you have 100% AD ratio on her W. Let's say you're thinking about building Bork on a different champion, maybe like Kaisa, where she has big AD ratio on W and on Q, and a little bit of utility from an AD ratio on her ult, or an even more caster AD carry. Then that 5 AD starts to become a little bit of a problem for you, like a bigger thorn in your side than it would be, bigger negative. But yeah, so that's about the break-even point for Bork. I'd say that that's too much HP. Like for a first item, them needing to have an average of 1900 HP is really high. They'd have to have like a 3000 HP tank that is bringing their average way up, and you'd have to better make sure that you're hitting that person instead of the other people. And then you don't even want to have to necessarily play like that, because you want to be hitting the 3000 HP Cho'Gath instead of focusing the right people. that has its own negatives, right? Because even if you're doing less damage to like hitting their 80 carry, it's probably still preferable to focus their 80 carry than the Cho'Gath, right? So that's that's the thing. Okay, finally, Wit's End. Let's take a look. So Wit's End, 50% attack speed, 45 damage on hit. So let's start with the 45 damage on hit. So where were we here originally with Kraken Slayer? We're going to bring this down to 45. So we're losing a little bit of on-hit damage compared to Kraken, but not much. And considering Wit's End is a lot cheaper, that could actually be good, especially when we're talking about, right, this is going to allow us to get to a second item quicker, like a Phantom Dancer, when we're under-indexed on attack speed, right? And we're going to get a lot of other benefits from this item. Wit's End is a weird item that's giving you a lot of magic resist and tenacity and stuff like that. That's obviously not going to count towards our DPS. So if our DPS is very close, even though it's giving us all this other stuff, well, maybe it's nice to have that other stuff. Okay, so Wit's End. So there's the on hit. And then what's happening with the attack speed for Wit's End? 50% attack speed versus 40% attack speed. So that's actually really good, because for the first time we're actually gaining in a category as well. So we're actually gaining 10% attack speed times Ashe's base attack speed. Attack speed ratio again. I'm cooked. It's fine. Okay, so there we go, right? That's really interesting, because now we have a contender, right? Surely are we losing something else? No, I think that's it. We just gained 10% attack speed and lost, on average, a little bit of... Oh, never mind. I see where I did make a mistake. Okay, so we didn't only go from 45 versus the 49 on this one. That was the on hit on this one versus on hit on this one. We get no attack damage. So we actually need to take away 45 attack damage. So we don't have 139 here, because we've got to take away 45 attack damage that we would have gotten on Kraken Slayer. So we're only at 203. And there's not really a situation like with Bork where this one becomes better or something like that. We're just cooked. So you're giving up 60 damage per second in order to gain 300 gold towards your next item, and the tenacity and the magic resist. Probably not worth it in most cases. It can really depend, though. I could definitely see, like, let's say you're playing against double AP bot lane or something, or they have like a lot of AP in their comp and you really do value the magic resist. Maybe you could make the argument that if we like add up the gold value, because this isn't too bad, right? We're 60 damage off per second. If we add up the gold value from like the magic resist, if you actually want the magic resist, I think that this could be really good, because if you add up the gold value from the magic resist and you kind of think about that in terms of DPS, even though it's not actually giving that extra DPS, but it's worth the trade-off to you because of the gold value of the magic resist, then you could definitely see Wit's End having some value. Also, right, like, because the item's just straight up 300 gold cheaper, you're going to take that 300 gold and you're going to go buy a dagger, right, since you're under indexed. Actually, in this case, you probably want a longsword. So let's say Wit's End plus longsword is actually going to be a lot closer in DPS to Kraken Slayer, and you're going to get there at the same time because of the fact that it's 300 gold cheaper to complete Wit's End anyways, and you're that 300 gold faster towards completing your second item. I guess the other big problem here is that, like, and then, so maybe this would actually be the way to think about this too, because this is really complicated, is one of the issues is that, like I said, 80 carries that are going to go Infinity Edge Although Ashe is not necessarily one of those, doesn't have to be. Can see in some builds she is, and in a lot she isn't. But or maybe she's going at 4th, I don't know. But for a lot of champions that are going to build Infinity Edge, you'd really prefer to have a first item crit item, because you really do want to get to like 75% crit chance. And you want Infinity Edge, right? And you want Infinity Edge to be doing something with the extra critical strike damage that it's giving you. So if you could go a crit item and then go Infinity Edge, you would love to do that. The problem is, what item do you go, right? That's kind of the issue. Let's see if we can see. We see a big list of items here. Let's see if we can find this here. So if we go to critical strike, okay, so here we can see the items. Oh my goodness. They're giving us a bunch of garbage items that don't exist. Arena, Classic, Summoner's Rift. Okay, so all of these ones are actually in the game. So we've got like Essence Reaver, we talked about a little bit. So the problem with Essence Reaver is that it gives attack damage only. It doesn't give any attack speed. And so for a general, like if you think about a crit user, right? A crit user is going to want attack speed and attack damage and crit, right? They're going to want to balance between the three. And the issue with an item like Essence Reaver is that it's specifically designed for certain champions like Lucian that aren't going to auto attack frequently, but really want the mana. And I mean, it's such a niche item, they've made it. So, you know, you're going to have some sort of attack speed built into your kit, whether it's like Lucian passive giving you extra auto attacks, which is basically a form of attack speed, right? That's the issue here. So it's just not giving you a good balance between attack damage and attack speed. I mean, think of Kraken Slayer, right? What we're trying to compare to. Yes, Kraken Slayer doesn't give crit, so we could settle for an item that gives crit, that gives a little bit less AD and a little bit less attack speed. But this item is giving you like 95 damage on hit with the attack damage and the on hit, and it's giving you like 40% attack speed. So we have to be competing with an item like that, right? So where are we going to go? So it's not Essence Reaver for most champions, right? But I guess if you're a champion that likes Essence Reaver, does Lucian even build it? I mean, who even builds Essence Reaver? But it, you know, if Lucian likes it or something like that, I guess he could go Essence Reaver and then go Infinity Edge and then go like a Phantom Dancer or something like this, right? Is that Lucian's build? I'm kind of curious to see what Lucian's build is, or if there's any champion that even goes Essence Reaver. I can't even think of another one that might like it. Yeah, so he goes... yeah, so he actually does go Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge, although instead of building like a Phantom Dancer, he's going Navori, but that makes sense. Okay, so Navori for him. Or in this case, he's building Navori first and then getting Infinity Edge third. But these builds make sense, right? Okay, so Immortal Shield Bow. So Immortal Shield Bow has the same problem Essence Reaver does. It doesn't give any attack speed. So that's not ideal. You do get to have some attack speed, though, from your boots. It's not as terrible as it sounds, actually, to go Immortal Shield Bow first. Maybe it's kind of terrible. Okay, here's why Immortal Shield Bow is terrible, but why I think it's not as terrible as it looks. So, Immortal Shield Bow is not as terrible as it looks, because when we were talking, right, we said we know that the item, because it's giving you crit, is not going to give you as much damage on hit and attack speed as Kraken Slayer, right? but it's giving you so little attack damage. Same thing with Essence Reaver, I guess. That what if you just go it and then you have your attack speed from Berserker Greaves and then you move on to another item. You get Phantom Dancer, then you get Infinity Edge, or you just get Infinity Edge, right? What happens then? The thing about Immortal Shield Bow is that, well, again, it's giving you this, completely different thing rather than just a bunch of damage. It actually is gonna allow you to survive in a way that's kind of nice in a lot of fights. So that's kind of interesting, right? As like a first item option. It is kind of interesting there. What are the components like though? I mean, I don't even know. What are the components like? Can you even build this when you're laning? Yeah, I guess you can do this. It's not the best. It's not terrible. It's about what you'd expect for a full attack damage item. One of the reasons why I think it's probably going to end up being bad if you look at the numbers is because if you're building it as a first item, you're getting so much less from the shield because you're lower level that might really cut down on the value of the item. But, it's going to give you way less DPS than Kraken Slayer, but it's certainly going to make up for it with a pretty big shield. So there is that. So that might actually be okay. Infinity Edge is sort of decent. The problem with Infinity Edge is that you don't have any attack speed with it at all. And so you're not getting anywhere near the attack speed that you need to get. And so a lot of times it just feels better to build a crit item that's giving you a bunch of attack speed and then build the Infinity Edge. Oh, okay. I thought of something, right? This is what we talked about with just completely ignoring the items, though, themselves. And instead of building one item, two item, we're obviously in a situation where we need a lot of attack speed. Or like in either build, we're in a situation where we need a lot of attack speed or we need a lot of attack damage. Ideally, we'd like to be able to put, this is like the golden goose of AD carry itemization, is how can we put an item together that allows us to go crit item, crit item, crit item with Infinity Edge either second or third or in there, right? So that we're getting something good. What if we were to go, like instead of completing these items, what if we were to go some of the components of Phantom Dancer or something like that, like some of the attack speed of Phantom Dancer with Infinity Edge. So we're still getting Infinity Edge first, but we're just buying some attack speed with it. Or what if we, built Phantom Dancer? Oh, this is the same thing in reverse, but we build like a BF sword or something for Infinity Edge. So let's kind of take a look at something like this. Okay, so let's say that we had like, I don't know, we go Phantom Dancer, which is way over indexing us on attack speed, but it gives us that 25% crit chance and it's cheap. There's no reason why instead of, and Phantom Dancer doesn't give us anything for completing it at all. All it gives us is the ghosting passive, which is terrible. So if you didn't know, what permanently ghosted means that you can just walk through units. That's the only thing that the item does. So the item doesn't have an active or a passive. It's just stats. So if it's just stats anyways, and you don't get anything, just like Warmogs, and you don't get anything from completing the passive, why not just build Phantom Dancer, but buy a pickaxe in the middle of it when you need it? You're delaying Phantom Dancer, but completing Phantom Dancer is not really doing much for you anyways. I mean, I guess you get 10% crit. You will complete it before Infinity Edge, but you can buy as much. You could buy Pickaxe or BF Sword plus Phantom Dancer components, complete Phantom Dancer, and then complete Infinity Edge, and it's really good. Okay, I've kind of cooked. Look, there's a lot more we could get into, right? I mean, we could go at this forever. I do want to, I will finish going through the AD carry items and see. So obviously LDR, it's quite good. Let me think about the way that it works against armor. So the argument that I think people would make, the reason why you would build it fourth or something like later into the build is because, well, it's not as effective before people have built a bunch of armor. So is that true? Let me think. Yes, it is. Okay. Okay, case solved. Okay, so we're not going LDR first. Mortal Reminder, 35 AD, 30% armor pen. This suffers from the same problem as LDR, 25% crit chance, and then grievous wounds. Yeah, this is just not great. First, Phantom Dancer we talked about. I think if you're supplementing it with AD, like a pickaxe, a coal, you might run out of item space if you're trying to do as little AD as a coal. But if you try to get like a BF sword with components of Phantom Dancer, like imagine you go like pickaxe, dagger, 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 or you go and then you build that into your boots and your Phantom Dancer. Maybe even pick up a BF sword if you can. So your first back, maybe you're looking at like a BF sword if you can. Probably not going to find that recall. So maybe you get a pickaxe or your daggers, depending on whichever one of those is efficient. But if you pick up daggers first, then you just get the pickaxe when you get the chance next, when you need the AD. You get the pickaxe, boom, you complete the Phantom Dancer with a pickaxe, maybe with a pickaxe and a BF sword, depending on how many item slots you have and your Berserker Greaves. And then you got Berserker Greaves, you complete Phantom Dancer, but you're sitting on that pickaxe. All it does is delay you being ghosted with Phantom Dancer, and then you pick up Infinity Edge, and this is a really crazy build, I'm telling you. Actually, I really cooked with this one. Rapid Fire Cannon. This is giving you movement speed, attack speed, and the critical strike chance. No AD, no shot. I guess you could do something very similar to what we're talking about with Phantom Dancer with Rapid Fire. So let's say you're playing a champion that really benefits from Rapid Fire, like, I don't know, like a Jhin or a Caitlyn or something like that. There's actually no reason why you couldn't do the same thing if you really like Rapid Fire. So, I mean, same thing with like a Jinx or whatever. These champions also can potentially like Phantom Dancer, but actually it's the same concept. So what you could do here is you could build, a pickaxe that you would be going towards Infinity Edge, but then complete Rapid Fire Cannon. I guess you do delay Rapid Fire Cannon then by like 875 gold or something like that. And since Rapid Fire Cannon actually does give you a, passive, that's not so good. Obviously, you get way more attack speed with Phantom Dancer. I don't really think that Rapid Fire Cannon, it comes into, use in some really niche situations, like Jhin being able to use it as a long-range auto attack as a mosquito and then use his W, or for Caitlyn to be able to headshot from longer, and things like this. Maybe a champion that has slows, things like that. So I could see that, but probably you just prefer the Phantom Dancer, to be honest. In most cases, I think Rapid Fire is kind of overrated, but you could definitely do the same thing with Phantom Dancer. Okay, Runan's Hurricane is another one that we could do this with, right? So let's say we're getting a little bit less attack speed, but we're also gaining the movement speed back that we would have lost. So if we really like that movement speed, we're gaining that in Runan's. And then it does feel a little bit bad, though, because Runan's the passive is pretty nice, and we don't have any on-hit. Oh, the bolts are also affected by critical strike, though. Okay, so we could do the same thing with Runan's, and it's not like it's a big deal that you're not completing Runan's in lane, let's say. Like, there's no power spike there. Okay, so yeah, definitely you could do it with Phantom Dancer, Rapid Fire Cannon, and Runan's, but probably it would be best with Phantom Dancer. But Runan's, if you really wanted the item anyways, could actually be quite good. Obviously, in general, I think AD carries have always said that Runan's is better if you find yourself in a team fight where obviously you're in a situation where the enemy champions happen to be next to each other. And Phantom Dancer is going to be better when they're not next to each other, when you're doing single target. So that's generally the case. It can be hard to tell, but sometimes people can tell based on the team comp that they're going to be clumped or not clumped, and then Runan's would be better or Phantom Dancer would be better. I think that because Phantom Dancer doesn't really give a passive or active at all, this seems like a really good item to do it with, because there's no delay to the active or passive. It's just, straight up build a bunch of AD and attack speed. But all of a sudden, when you're completing Infinity Edge, your 2-item power spike You're still decently strong in the early game just because of your damage output. But your 2-item power spike is really crazy. Really crazy. And then Collector. Oh, and a lot of people do this with Collector. Collector's a great one too. So not for every champion, but if you don't need attack speed that much, could totally do this with Collector the other way around. Actually, there's kind of an issue with Collector. I'd say the issue with Collector is that you don't want to go Collector and then Infinity Edge, because then you're building 2 items that are not giving any attack speed. But if you went Collector and then you went an attack speed item and then you went an Infinity Edge, that would be really quite a good build. Or you'd have to have so much of an attack speed steroid that you could actually get away with going Collector Infinity Edge. Maybe Collector Infinity Edge would be an interesting build on Lucian too, because he's got so much built-in attack speed compared to other champions with his passive. Then these are, I guess you got Yuntol or whatever. I mean, this is the same thing. You wouldn't build this. I mean, also bad item, but you wouldn't really want to do that. Navori Flicker Blade. I mean, this is another good one. I mean, I don't really see why you couldn't go like Navori Flicker Blade. I know we keep talking about like Lucian, but like if you really benefit from Navori, why couldn't you go like Navori first item into Infinity Edge as a, to be able to build the double crit items instead of going, some on-hit item or whatever first. So these are really interesting. We could run the numbers, but this is taking a really long time. I'm kind of curious what the DPS would be. Ashe is probably not the champion we want to be comparing it on, though, because of the fact that we have to get into how Ashe works with crit. But let's just say, hypothetical, right? Ashe's attack speed ratio, all the AD carries have a similar range of attack speed ratios. So let's just use Ashe's attack speed ratio just to get a kind of a basic comparison. It'll be a little bit different on every champion. But what's the DPS output like on like a Phantom Dancer? And Phantom Dancer costs 2,650. So how much gold do we have left over here? We've got only 450. So that's not a lot. I mean, so we're kind of comparing apples and oranges if we put a pickaxe on top of this. Oh, but okay, we don't have to complete Phantom Dancer. So let's do like partial Phantom Dancer plus the pickaxe. And we're also like, even though it doesn't show it, because we're working off of the damage that we had here, we're assuming that we had, in this situation, it was Kraken and Berserker Greaves. So we are assuming Berserker Greaves in this. So we're just stripping away the extra stuff. So we're taking away the on-hit damage, right? So we're losing the on-hit damage from Kraken Slayer right off the bat. So what are we getting here from Phantom Dancer? So all we're getting is attack speed. So we also have to take away the AD. So how much AD did Kraken Slayer give? Kraken Slayer gave 45 AD. So we're taking minus 45. All we're gaining is attack speed. Well, for now, we're going to add the pickaxe. So Phantom Dancer gives... We need to look at the actual recipe, though, because we might not build the whole thing. So let's say we're sitting on Dagger, Zeal, Dagger. How much does the upgrade cost? Oh, it's 900... Wait, is it really? Oh, but you must get a lot of the attack speed from completing it, though. So how much is 950 plus a pickaxe, which is like 875? I mean, that's like 1825. That's so cheap. But anyways, that's not really what we're trying. So that kind of sucks. I was thinking we could take away like 200 or 300 gold because, from not completing Phantom Dancer, but Phantom Dancer is 950 gold to complete, and a lot of, I'm assuming it gives a lot of stats. So you're getting, wait, is it not? You're getting 45% attack speed. from your components of Phantom Dancer. So you go from 45 to 60. So it's giving you 15% attack speed, 10% crit, and a lot of movement speed. 4% movement speed is what you're getting from completing it. So do we want to say that we're completing it or say that we're not completing it? Let's start by just saying we're completing it. It'll be easier. So 2,650 gold, we're getting 60% attack speed, and that's all we're really considering right now. So 60% attack speed is going to do what for us? Well, we're comparing it to Kraken. And Kraken's giving 45 attack damage. Did we take that away? Yeah, we took that away. Kraken's giving 40% attack speed. So even if we complete the whole thing, we're only getting an extra 20% attack speed. Plus 20% times the attack speed ratio. But then we need to add in the pickaxe. How much AD is a pickaxe? This guy didn't build a pickaxe. 25. So we can add in 25 AD. So Phantom Dancer plus pickaxe is actually more expensive than Kraken Slayer. And yet we're dropping a lot of DPS. We're dropping 80 DPS. To be fair though, Phantom Dancer is giving us 8% movement speed instead of 4 and 25% crit chance. So on average, when we crit, how much damage do we do? Critical strike. Should say right in this article, right? You deal 175% of your normal value when you crit. So we're not actually doing this amount because we have this, but our expected value is to do 75% more damage 25% of the time. What does that even mean? I think we just multiply the two together. Yeah, so on average, we're doing an extra 18.75%. So if we take our 182 DPS and multiply it by that, it looks a lot better, because if you take the crit into account, we're actually doing more like this, 216. So we're doing like 43 less damage per attack on average. And while the crit is inconsistent at 25%, it's 1 in 4, so is Kraken Slayer at 1 in 3, right? When you're really thinking about it. So we're averaging both of them out. So obviously, actually, if you think about it, some of these other items are giving you more consistent damage, right? If you're not getting that crit or you're not getting to that third auto attack. These are doing more damage, but they're riskier, let's say. Or actually, this isn't even doing more damage, but this will do more damage at 2 items, which is obviously kind of the point. But is it worth being under indexed like that? And then the question would be, because you can switch this up, like you're probably over indexed on attack speed with this Phantom Dancer pickaxe Berserker Greaves. So what if you had like BF sword, but then, you know, we drop some of the attack speed and stuff from Phantom Dancer? I guess the problem with that is that then we're even more expensive. or if we drop completing Phantom Dancer, our crit drops off significantly because now we're, you know, losing a huge amount of this, like 30 to 40 extra damage from crits, because our crit chance is dropping way down to 10% instead of 25%. So Phantom Dancer plus pickaxe. So what if we had like, well, I'll leave this one for you guys to figure out. If we've gone long enough, surely. But yeah, that's basically the idea. I think obviously if you start to look into 2 items, when you look at like Kraken Slayer plus Phantom Dancer versus like Phantom Dancer plus Infinity Edge, Phantom Dancer Infinity Edge is should pack a much bigger punch in terms of your DPS than Kraken Slayer and Phantom Dancer would, right? So even when you get to like, well, I guess you could go back and build it. You probably wouldn't want to at that point. Probably build another crit item. So anyways, you know, definitely some interesting options there. I think that Phantom Dancer, because it doesn't really give a passive, it's mostly just a stat stick, is exactly the same as what we were looking at when we were getting into the same concept for support. There's obviously more work to be done on this. Let me know what you guys think. Good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.